7 o'clock, where's everybody? Let's see, we're missing, let's give Dave another minute. Ah, he's there. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Board of Directors, Newberg School District 29J. Let's start with the flag salute. I did not ask for a volunteer this week. Would somebody like to volunteer to lead us? Okay, it's me. I will volunteer to lead us. All right. If you'd like to participate, feel free. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we can review our agenda, and there is a change to the agenda. Would anybody like to discuss that or make a suggestion? I don't think it has to be a motion, but a suggestion. Nope. We suggested that we add the classified employee contract under new business. Is anyone opposed to that?
No.
Nope.
I support it since we just learned that the contract has been concluded. So it'd be timely and help everybody along if we can approve it.
Okay. So I will put it, I don't know, I guess it could go. Let's just do it as item A, if everyone's comfortable with that. Okay. All right, we have 2 requests for public comment tonight. I'm just going to quickly remind everybody here. The Newberg School Board invites and encourages citizens' attendance and involvement. The board encourages citizens to share their ideas, opinions, raise questions, concerns, or complaints. And thank you to everyone who has submitted a request to speak and to those who have sent in comments and that are here for viewing. In order to conduct a timely meeting, we ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. Requests to speak during the meetings are not accepted. When called, please state your name, relationship to the district, place of residence, and the subject which you will address. The board may choose not to address your request if your topic is outside the scope of board governance. We ask that you remember that Oregon law prohibits us from discussing specific employees or their job performances. I also ask that your comments focus on board members' actions and refrain from personal or character attacks. Thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. And as a board, the comments we hear help guide us in our decisions and help educate us as leaders in the community. Okay, first up, since there's only 2, I guess I don't have to really do an order, but let's go ahead and have Heidi, if you're ready.
And while you're getting ready, I do have my time thing. So when they have 1 minute left and 30 seconds, I don't have to make a new one this time.
Thank you, Ron.
Hi. I want to thank you tonight for your attention to and affirmation of the revisions to the Student Code of Conduct that were passed at the last school board meeting. As the parent of a Black student in Newberg schools, I carry great concern for the fear that my daughter experiences when she encounters symbols of hate, such as the Confederate flag, swastika symbols, as well as words of hate in her daily life as a student in Newberg schools. All of last year, there was a parent who picked his daughter up from Mountain View Middle School and from Newberg High School, flying a Confederate flag from his car with words spray painted across the back and sides of his vehicles that said, "Powered by hate." My daughter Katya felt afraid to walk near this vehicle and the adult driving it. While the Student Code of Conduct revisions don't affect a parent parked on the street, they do make clear to students that this type of behavior and posturing from students themselves is not acceptable. I'm thankful for your willingness to show all of our students that you care about their safety. I also want to commend and affirm the folks responsible for crafting the school bond initiative before our community in the next general election. I read through all the materials and I'm impressed with how thoughtfully the bond addresses identified needs in our schools. I appreciate that it is conservative and is only asking for funds for the most needed issues affecting our students on a daily basis. The Edwards Elementary building is in desperate need of modernization. I don't have kids that go there or have gone there, but I've been in that building and I see the need. I hope the message this school bond sends to our students on the south side of town is one of hope and the relief at being seen and heard. I will joyfully vote yes so that all Newberg students know their community values their education. And finally, my daughter, who is an 8th grader in Newberg Public Schools, has initiated the formation of a district-wide Black Student Union or Black Student Affinity Group to be established in each of our schools. Out of her own pain and loneliness, feeling very isolated in her lived experiences as a Black student in Newberg schools, she and other Black students are realizing their need for a safe place to come together in fellowship and support of each other as Black students in majority white schools. Last night, she joined other Black students in sharing with our school administrators and district staff why it feels so important to them to form a Black student union or affinity groups in their district and individual schools. My heart was alternately broken and filled to the brim with pride, hearing them share their stories of both pain and courage. I hope you as school board members will support these students and their advisors in their quest to create a safe place for them to gather and provide encouragement to each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you for sharing that. And next up, we have Kat.
Hi,
There you are. Go ahead.
I'm Kat McNeil. I have 3 children. Currently, one who attends part-time Mountain View Middle School, another at Newberg High School. I also have served on the budget committee for 7 years, and of those 7 years, I have chaired the last 4. I'm speaking tonight to concerns I have regarding Director Shannon's public statements and actions. I'm basing my comments on both my observations of public school board meetings and public records request of his communications with constituents and other district stakeholders, which reveal conduct violating several district policies. On July 10th, in an email, Director Shannon wrote to a community member, Brandy Penner chose to skip over your email, but to respond to other emails in favor of the resolution. On July 10th, 8 emails were received by the school board members about the resolution. Director Penner responded to all 8 emails, including 3 that were in support of Director Brown. Director Shannon only responded to 2 of those emails. Both were in support of Director Brown, but did not respond to any in support of the resolution. Director Shannon appears to be playing politics and has not accepted the majority rule in the board decisions, which is a violation of board ethics policy, BFF. In the 2 recent discussions surrounding the code of conduct, it was apparent that Director Shannon had not asked questions ahead of time, even though Director Penner had asked him to, and that the presenter offered to connect outside of the meeting. This more than doubled the allotted time for the discussion. Director Shannon did not share his ultimate concerns until the topic had been discussed for over an hour in total. This does not adhere to the effective meeting portion of the superintendent and board working agreement. The communication section of the working agreement state the board chair shall respond to any communications to the whole board within 36 to 72 hours. On July 15th, in an email response to a community member, Director Shannon wrote, Brandy's response caused me to miss your email. Director Penner's reply to the emails are required per board policy and do not cause board members to miss emails. It is petty and disingenuous to suggest in a community email that the board chair, following procedures, should be blamed for Director Shannon missing a message, and it speaks to his efforts to undermine her. On August 25th meeting, during his comment time, Director Shannon spent time speaking against anti-racism, although the resolution had already passed 2 months prior, and the time for the board deliberation had already been done. He disregarded Penner Chair's call to hold these comments until a later time, speaking forcefully over Director Penner. This is not the first time that he has spoken in this manner to another board member. On July 15th, in an email to community member, Director Shannon called the anti-racism resolution a political popular initiative, ignoring and dismissing the years of systematic racism our country has experienced, as well as dozens of personal experience students of color have shared with the NPS board. According to the policy BBAA regarding individual board members' authority and responsibility, he should have simply referred to the constituent suggestion action to refer to the superintendent for consideration. Instead, he replied with his personal beliefs. Policy AABB also states that board members shall not intervene in the administration of the district or its school. In an email to Dr. Morlock, Director Shannon requested the firing of Assistant Principal Dr. David Hamus for posting a political meme to his private social media account. This is an attempt to intervene in the administration of a school, which is an appropriate use of Director Shannon's position. The end goal of the superintendent and the board working agreement states, we all work collectively for the benefit of students in the district and agree to help children at the focus of our work and decisions. Director Shannon's actions repeatedly do not reflect that. The above are just a few examples of Director Shannon's constant efforts to undermine the work of the school board, which has led to the hostile board working environment. During the board evaluation portion of tonight's meeting, I propose the board discuss additional facilitated education opportunities for Director Shannon and censure him until such a time when it becomes evident that he can be equipped to join in collective work. Director Mock has repeatedly noted that this board has great potential. However, it is apparent that additional supports are needed to make this a reality. Director Shannon's actions and treatments of others during public meetings do not model a willingness to work in partnership with his fellow board members. This puts our district at risk of falling into dysfunction that could disrupt student achievement both now, which is in a critical time, and in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you for joining us tonight. Next up, we have board comments. Are there any board comments this evening?
I'd like to say something.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
I was able to attend the Mountain View parent meeting the other night. And first of all, I want to thank the Mountain View team to have a translator there translating the entire meeting, which was very well attended and had a large Latina involvement with the questions. And it was really, really a great meeting to experience. And during that meeting, Brandy had an opportunity to share about the bond. And I was very impressed with the presentation. And I wanted to thank her for her involvement. Then the other night, I listened to the Newberg City Council meeting where Joe and Brandy were able to present the reasonings behind the bond and the reason for voting for the bond. And again, I was impressed with the presentation and the tough questions the city council members gave Joe and Brandy. And we were very well represented there, and I want to thank them for that. And I want to go on record to say why I am voting for yes for the NPS is as a retired person with no children in the district, I am voting yes because I think of the children to come, the children in the school district right now who are going to be my future caregivers, my policemen, my doctors, my teachers. They're going to be responsible citizens of my community. And I feel it's important that I honor their future by voting yes. So thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Let's see, I'll just go round robin style. Ron, do you have comments? No, okay, Bob, comments?
Yes, I've got two comments tonight. The first one is Yo no hablo español, pero su voz es importante y necesitamos oírla. Necesitamos su ayuda para asegurar que su estudiante tenga la mejor educación posible. En el sitio web del distrito, haz clic Distrito y Consejo Escolar para obtener la información de contactar a todos los miembros del Consejo Escolar. Podemos traducir los comentarios. Su apoyo es importante. Gracias. The other comment I have is that this month, September, is National Emergency Preparedness Month. And another reason why I would really like folks to support our bond measure is that this is the first time that I've seen the district be able to allocate money specifically for resiliency and for preparedness. There is $1 million in this bond that is dedicated for resiliency spending. And I think that is a critical beginning to the work of preparing our district for whatever natural disasters may come, whether it's the Cascadia event or more wildfires. So it's important that you vote for the bond. If you need more information, go to voteyesfornps.org, or you can also contact me directly. The contact information is on the district website.
Thank you, Bob. That was impressive. Well done. Let's see, Dave, do you have any comments tonight?
Yeah, can you hear me, Brandy? I'm had lunch with a fellow board member about a week and a half ago, and it was good. We talked about how we're doing as a board. We just caught up together, and it was good. Just that communication time. I'll leave who it was to another time, but it was a great conversation. But I was told, something. Like I said, I always try to listen to everybody, and the comment came about that's given me a couple of weeks to reflect on this is when I've made the comment that I don't see color. And so I thought about that, quite a bit, and I just wanted to clarify that we're in such a interesting time right now in our society where we're all over the place, politically and thoughts and all that kind of stuff. So I want to clarify when I say I don't see color. As a coach my entire life and somebody who's ran businesses and had to work with lots of different people, I obviously see color. I do. If somebody's black or brown or white, I see it. But I also see if somebody's tall or short. That is my chocolate lab right there, so protecting me. Lucy. I also see people for, all their things that come up about them. Sorry for my dog, you guys. I see people, I notice everything about them. I notice if they're happy, if they're sad. I notice if they're rude or they're polite. I'm pretty aware. And when I do see color, I do notice that right off the bat that somebody is black. I don't care if they're black. I see people who are brown. I'm not going to treat them any different than I would anybody else. So my comment to everybody is I do see that, and I respect if somebody is black or brown or white. And I always will. I just don't think there's any other way to move on that. So I do see color, and I value that person. I know they have a unique experience with their culture and what they've done, who they are, where they're coming from. And that's what makes the United States so awesome, is we are a melting pot of 1,000 different kinds of people that have come to this country. And so when I say I don't see color, I hope that clarifies it for some people who felt like that might be a slight towards them. Because again, I value every person. And if that means that they're brown, I value them. If they're black, I'll value them. If they're white, I'm going to value them. If they're old or young or man or woman, they're valued. So thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Let's see, Inez, any comments tonight?
No comments.
All right, I just wanted to say thank you as I was kind of reflecting on tonight's meeting and thinking about, the last 2 weeks and what I've done as a board member. And first of all, I want to say thank you to the teachers and the staff and the administrators who are teaching our children. I mean, I've got 3 kids and I can tell you that it has gone exceedingly well for us. The platform that we're on, that COA is using, is incredibly easy to use and to navigate. And that is from somebody who does not read directions and pretty much just goes by my user intuition, which is pretty minimal. So it is, I have been quite excited and pleased with that as well. And I want to thank Dr. Morlock. We had a great time with the Newberg City Council, and both the Dundee and the Newberg City Councils were welcoming, and we had thoughtful conversations and really engaging questions asked of us. And I want to thank all the parent groups that I've been able to go into. Rebecca mentioned Mountain View. I've also been to NHS Boosters, Mabel Rush. There's more, CV. I don't know. They're all starting to run together at this point now, but it is awesome because the uniting theme is that parents are out there and they're organizing and they are still supporting our teachers and our staff, and they are engaged and also asking really important and great questions. So I want to thank all of them. And I still have someone coming up too, so that'll keep going. And the other big thank you too, is going to be to Mountain View specifically, because they do have that interpreter service now. And I went to their parent group a couple of years ago, and I think there were like 4 or 5 people, and 2 of them were building administrators, and one of them was me. And when I went a couple weeks ago, there were over 20 people and lots of good questions and engagement. And I think that that is in large part due to the barrier removed with the translating services. And I think it can be a really great model for other parent groups and also for other groups in the district as well. So well done. All right, Joe, are you ready for superintendent comments?
I am. Thank you very much. I wanted to thank all of our staff, of course, for the incredible amount of hard work that they have been doing and we'll hear from several folks tonight about the opening of school, but just wanted to thank them because I know this is really hard. And I want to thank all of the caring adults who may be pulling out or losing the last bit of hair they had left as they support the kids who are in their home or sharing their home. This is really hard. There are 3 of us on this district team who have kids who are doing that currently. So Dr. Brown, Dr. Neff, and myself are all experiencing this from a parental side. And I can tell you that we have empathy because we are doing the same thing and trying to figure out math and relearning some stuff and trying to keep people or keeping our own kids organized. And so it's a challenging time. And I'm grateful that I'm also experiencing it at the same time with my own children. I think it always reminds me every day that everybody's working really hard and it's super stressful, and we just need to do the best we can because it's hard and we're getting better. I think it's been interesting to watch as we kind of settled into some rhythms and some routines. I think having some of those things have been really helpful, but I just wanted to thank the whole community I know you guys are wrapping your arms around all these kids who need the support. We still have more to do. We're still trying to work on making sure we get more kids, more support. We had some folks in an email chain today figuring out how to support one student, and they're going to just come together and do a whole other kind of thing just to help out that kid. And they're just doing it, time and time again. And so just want to thank everybody for all their hard work, because I know this is really challenging. And we will get through this just like we get through everything else, and we will learn all kinds of things. I also wanted to give a quick enrollment update, and I'm just going to start with a caveat that this is data that we're still collecting. We don't have our finalized numbers, which we do on October 1st, but I wanted to give kind of a brief update. I know we will do a full report in the coming weeks, but so I don't want to take away too much from that. But I did want to give a little bit of an update because people have been asking about where enrollment is and where some of the kids have gone and have they come and things like that. So right now we are down about 380 students from last year, which is a big number. One of those differentials, however, is that the incoming kindergarten class is about 136 students fewer than our outgoing 12th grade class. So we start right there with a differential. We knew that we would probably have something a bit lower coming in. So for reference, that's about 80 fewer than we had come in last year in kindergarten. We do know that people are deciding to delay kindergarten because of the situation. And so they're going to push it off until next year. So we know we have some of that going on. In elementary, we have shifted from some of our numbers over to COLA. So I want to give so last year, our elementary COLA was 18 students. There were 18 students in COLA. This year, there are 226 elementary students who are in COA. So that's a fairly significant shift. The number differential this year, we have about 1,889 students. Last year, we had 2,124, so we're down a few there. Our middle school is holding relatively steady, but we have 159 students in the COA program from our middle school. Last year we had 15. So we have lots of kids who were in middle school last year who decided to do COA this year. So our catalyst in 2019, so those are our high school students who are doing COA or a combination of those at catalyst. Last year was 126. We're already starting this year at 202. So we have some students going to that. We have brought in 36 new students to Newberg under inter-district transfer from other districts. 20 of those 36 going to COA. Going to another district, we have 85 going out. So some are going to the Yamhill Carlton Alliance Academy. Actually was our largest one. It's a curriculum that's kind of home focused. It's very similar to COA. We're not sure why people chose that over ours, but that's one of the ones that took that. For virtual charter schools, we have 145 people who selected a virtual charter school other than ours. There is a 3% cap of the maximum number of students who we allow to go out, but that cap has not yet been reached, and that would be at 168. So those are Oregon Charter Academy, Oregon Virtual Academy, Summit Learning Center, and Connections Academy. So we also have had 28 new notifications for homeschool for this year. In reference to last year, we had 2. So we've had more kids or more families choosing to homeschool. And a note about homeschool, we don't always get all the notifications. So we had 2 last year. We had far more than 2 kids in homeschool. So the challenge in homeschool numbers is you actually really never know how many kids are being homeschooled and how many decide later on to choose a private school or to return to us. So all in all, the virtual charter, our lower kinder, some of the transfer out, and some of the homeschool notification additions, that's bringing us up to that, 338. That gets us pretty close to that, and then you have some normal attrition. So we do have lower numbers. We expect that those will bounce up next year. We'll have an official full report with all of this kind of thing coming up in the next few weeks that we'll deliver as we zero in more on these numbers. So these numbers are a little bit squishy, but I wanted to give the board an update because I know there are some questions around that and what does it look like for us at this current time. And that's what I have. So we'll have more of an update. And if you have questions about that, please email and I can respond out to each of you if you have those questions about further things in enrollment.
Okay, thank you, Jay.
You're welcome.
Director Pena, I'm gonna have to ask you to remove that incredibly cute child because those cheeks are distracting me and I cannot conduct this business meeting.
I'm sorry.
They're so cute. Okay, just kidding, sorry. Next up, we have consent agenda. Are there any questions or discussion on the consent agenda?
I would move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I can second.
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Rebecca, I can't see if your hand is, yep, there we go. Perfect. The baby cannot vote. All right, thank you. Passes unanimously. Perfect. All right, next up, we have Dr. Morlock to tell us all about our school opening update.
Thank you. Well, I'm actually, since I'll be speaking on other things.
Before Joe
Right.
gets started, didn't we add an agenda item and you said to make it A to approve the classified contract.
Yes, but I put it under new business. Do you think we should do it differently?
No, I just got confused. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Yep.
So I'll go back to mute.
That's quite all right. Okay, so I've got some of our folks here. I thought we would pass the discussion around a little bit to talk about the opening of school. I mentioned it a little bit in my comments. I think we've actually had a very good launch. We've got through a few hurdles early on, but I think by and large, some of the comments that I've heard coming back are that it's going better than expected by some. It's harder than expected by others, but I think that's very fair. I know this is a big challenge for folks, but I just have to hand it to the team that will talk to you tonight, but all of our building leaders and all of our teachers and staff for the just incredible amount of work. I'm going to go in this order, so I'm going to throw things around a little bit. So I'm actually going to start with Shiloh, and then I'm going to go to Derek, Karen, Anne, and then we'll follow it up with Luke. So I think that we'll cover it in that direction. So Shiloh, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, video check. Can everybody hear me? Oh my God, this is great. Well, we've had a great start to the school year. We our first delivery that we launched a week and a half ago, we did about 8,500 meals our first delivery, which we had a little hiccups on the road with the organization with First Student and our data. So we really reflected over the weekend, and my entire staff put their best foot forward, and we really smoothed the operation out by our second delivery, which was last Wednesday, and Friday went pretty smooth. And there's still some fine tuning to keep refining, but we've been really working with churches like Northwest Christian Church is starting to, I think their enrollment's going to be about 50 students. And there's several churches that are trying to do some co-op with parents and help with distance learning. So we're working with churches on how we can provide food for them during the week. So a lot of them are jumping on doing that starting here in the next few weeks. Starting tomorrow, we have a delivery, and I will be up to about 35,000 meals in 4 deliveries, which is pretty crazy when you look at that. It was, we thought we would ease into it a little bit, but we're sprinting full ahead. And we open next week. We will have an option for families to pick up if they don't want deliveries, or we'll have an open site for families that just want to hop in every once in a while at the high school Wednesdays and Fridays. And then we had discussion about switching some of our delivery days. So Wednesday and Fridays are our delivery days, but if we have a holiday, say October 9th, I believe is next Friday, we're just going to stick with Wednesday and Friday. And if Wednesday is the only day, we're going to load that day up with 4 or 5 meals. Just because we think switching those delivery days, parents are really reliant on those consistent days. So we're going to kind of work around that. And then as far as weekend meals, I know when I was on here last, I said that my goal is to start that October 1st. I'm probably going to give it a little 2 more weeks, just so we can fine tune our operation right now before we take on too much. But I've been really proud of our staff. It's totally different when you're prepping 800, 900 servings of one dish when we're used to doing like 100. So, but everybody just working together, the teamwork and the collaboration is pretty amazing. And just all the other administrators that have provided help with EAs helping with the bus delivery. First Student's been amazing. Larry Hampton, the custodian staff, have been helping load buses. So it is definitely a village that's taken to pull this off. And I can't thank everybody enough for all the support. So does anybody have any questions?
Was when they interviewed you for the position, was one of the questions, how will you provide food during a pandemic?
No.
No, I didn't think so. But I do have a question. I know it's still early, but are you seeing any patterns on who are having trouble getting meals out to? You know, is there a demographic or some sort of unifying characteristic on students that are not getting meals as consistently as we'd like to get them out? And it might be too early to see that, but that's just something I want to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something to look at. I really haven't combed through a lot of that data because it went from 500 kids to 1,100, and now we're pushing over 1,600. I'm expecting it to level out at some point where we can start digging deep into that data. I know that the counselors and the secretaries and everybody they've been super proactive about when they're making that family contact, they're asking if they need help. Let me fill that form out for you. So I feel like our support system at Newberg is really great just across the board with all the schools. So that's some kind of data I could try pulling up for you guys.
Thank you, Shiloh. Appreciate you guys and your team. All right, Dr. Brown.
Thank you, Dr. Morlock, and good evening, everybody. So we're off and running. Lots of good things going on in schools right now. As you know, as we talked about over the summer, the team worked with our teachers and worked with our administrators to identify quite a few new resources in terms of curriculum and instructional materials that we were going to try to leverage to improve the experience in a comprehensive distance learning environment this fall, as compared to the distance learning piece that we all experienced last spring. So lots of time and energy went into getting ready to get the school year launched last week. And we're hearing pretty good things right now. To be fair, I think some mixed feedback from teachers, specifically relative to some of the curriculum choices that we've made. So we're collecting feedback from teachers right now about how those tools are working out in the early going. We're working with the vendors directly to provide support to teachers as they are having questions for us. So there's a lot of back and forth right now as we're kind of learning how to do this. Any time that you're working with this many vendors at one time, you're going to have a bit of push and pull as we kind of iron out our processes and routines around how we do the systems integration piece. So how we get students loaded into systems so that teachers can provide the curricular resources and see their kids and see how they're engaging with the learning tools. So again, we've had a lot of positive feedback about how that's going in the early going. And I've certainly received plenty of questions from teachers about specific things about the tools and whether or not a particular functionality might exist, and then going back and forth with vendors. In the coming weeks, we'll be putting together small teams of teachers and administrators, and I'll be facilitating meetings with them to, again, learn more about the tools we're using, and then maybe a level above that, learn a little bit more about how the comprehensive distance learning process and experience is going.
Your audio just dropped out on us, Derek.
Which had a bit of a different purpose behind it. But also, we always want to be in a continuous improvement cycle. So we're excited about getting started and feeling good about the direction we're going with this right now, but we know that we'll need to spend plenty of time with really good feedback loops for teachers and families to help us understand how we can be better. And we're looking forward to continuing to improve.
Are we doing questions now or at the end?
Yeah, question, that would be great.
Derek, you were talking about some aspect of new, I think you said curricula, or maybe you also said tools that we're using this year.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it's been a little rough. Is that, were those tools that were designed for comprehensive distance learning, or were they tools that were sort of more standard curricula that's not adjusting well? I couldn't quite understand where the problem was arising.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Ron. We brought together some teachers late last summer to look at different curricular options. And one of the criteria that they cared a lot about, and I know we at the district office cared a lot about too, was, is it designed in a flexible enough way that it could work really well in a comprehensive distance learning dynamic, and potentially in a hybrid or in-person model. So, hoping optimistically that we'll get back to school as soon as possible. So the tools that have been selected certainly can work well in an online space, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're across the board using them as efficiently as we should in an online space. In other words, it just takes time for people to learn how to use the tools well. And I have to really give a lot of credit to teachers for taking on a lot. I think taking on more, particularly on the back end of this summer, and then over their 2 weeks of essentially in service to get ready. At the elementary level, they had new math, new science, and new ELA curriculum. And then at the other levels, they had some components of those things. So I think some of the fits and starts that we're feeling have to do with mostly just learning the new tools and how these platforms work, and a little bit less to do with are they designed specifically for online or not online learning. Although again, we believe that we've chosen things that will work, that can have the potential to work really well in both, just to try to use our resources well.
Okay.
Well,
Anything else
was-
for Derek? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Whatever was bothering Dave's dog a while ago is apparently out here in Dundee now. So,
Derek, one question I had, I asked this before and I don't remember what the answer was. I don't think you had it yet. Have you heard what the expectations are from the state as far as standardized testing, and kind of just want to look at how are we going to, track progress on students. This year is going to be most likely going to be an odd bubble in any data that we're looking at, but just wondering what tools we're going to have to help monitor our progress and success on how this is working.
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. And we were actually on the phone earlier today with a portion of our principals talking about how that's going to go. Let me answer the first part for the state testing piece first. Right now, the state is planning on implementing state tests in the spring as they normally do. We've trained our staff right now on how to use the ELPA screener, which is the English Language Proficiency Assessment Screener. So it's the tool the state gives us to determine if students are potentially eligible to receive English language development services.
We lost him again. Hang on.
No.
So there we go.
There you go.
Right. I'm in the back corner of the house, so the internet might be weak back here. But state testing is we're planning on running that. I do know from the state that if we do run state tests, they're going to not include this time the performance task component of those, which is going to create some interesting data conversations for us. And we can get at that a little bit later. I'll come back with a more comprehensive conversation for you to tell you what that looks like. The part B, Bob, around what are we doing prior to that point is we do use an assessment called DIBELS for our English language arts, and that is a diagnostic tool. It gives us good information about what skills students need to focus on. And then with the Into Math pilot we're doing in math, they have some assessment components as well that we want to try out as part of the pilot. So we're working through the logistics of how to do that in comprehensive distance learning. We can do that remotely. I do know quite a few districts are doing that remotely. There's certainly some risk there when you're administering a test in a home versus in a classroom. But we feel like if we've got good communication in place, we'll be able to help students and families understand how to do that in a way that'll hopefully give us high quality data. We have talked about the possibility for some of our younger grades of maybe having them come in kind of one at a time and do shorter assessments so that we can get a baseline for how they're doing. We haven't ironed out all the details of how we're going to pull that off yet, but we know that having kindergartner and first grade kids just taking a test at home and not having any assistance from parents is going to create all kinds of issues for us and probably not a great learning experience for anybody. So we're trying to work through the best way to do that. We have some ideas, but we haven't quite fleshed it out completely yet.
This has been real helpful. I think. Thanks for that. Appreciate it, Derek.
I'll come back again sometime in the next maybe month or so and give you a little bit more information on the testing piece and some of the other teaching and learning bits as well.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Karen Bugsley.
Yes. Hello, everybody. You know, the first week and a half of school is just basically responding, problem solving, helping, especially 612 principals, if they have any questions, or really for me, it's proactively connecting with leadership so that I can figure out what kind of resources they need. It's been actually a pretty smooth opening in terms of just leadership structures, and it seems like people are doing really well in terms of just making sure that their staff meetings are there and that professional learning is occurring and students are getting what they need during their time of synchronous and asynchronous learning. Of course, it's a stretch, and folks are putting a lot of energy up front in order to make sure that they are doing the very best that they can. And so a lot of my work over the last couple of weeks have been just really a support person. In addition to that, I am also working on an equity initiative for the district. And so up until, up until now, I have interviewed 23 leaders in our district about using 5 focus questions about equity and how they see where we are in some key indicators in our movement toward equitable outcomes for students. And I must say that that has been a project and continues to be a project that is really informative. It is providing some good qualitative data, but it's also really starting conversations about where we want to go as a district, what are the obstacles, and also what are the strengths that we have. And I think that I know that those conversations will help us plan together and make an excellent district-wide equity plan. There is a team that's been pulled together, and I'm helping with that team. It's really a district equity team. And the work for that team is to really put down very specific actions and evaluative indicators so that we can make sure that we're making progress toward the goals that we have as a district for our students and for our staff. And so that has been a wonderful opportunity as well to work with folks, a very diverse group of people, very curious about the work, very committed to the work. And so that has been, when you're working on a project that feels really productive, that just is a great way to show up every day when you go to work. So that's where we're at right now with some of that work. Of course, we have lots more work to do. Right now, it's very preliminary, but I would say that it's gaining traction and momentum, and it's really exciting to be part of those conversations and that planning. So that's what I've been working on. Any questions?
Yeah, Karen, I do.
Yeah, sure do.
I had 2 questions.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me how you see an equitable outcome at the end of the day between after that's all done? So, I mean, the outcome is there.
Mm-hmm.
And then also just more of a pointed question. Who would be the person who approved freshman English at Newberg High School this year?
Okay, let's back up to the first one because I'm not sure if I can answer the second one, but I can answer the first one, which is what does an equitable outcome look for students at Newberg School District? For me, and I think a lot of the folks that are working on this, that we do not want to see discrepancies based on race, socioeconomic status, gender, disability, when we have outcomes of basically students' achievement. So when we have gaps in that, that means that our systems aren't meeting the needs of all of our students. And gaps means that we have maybe, for example, a 75% pass rate. And it's not just state assessments, but that is a really important thing to look at as well, because we want to make sure students are ready to graduate from Newberg High School. So when we see gaps in that data, our goal is to lean into those gaps and to try to figure out what is it that students need to be able to make sure that they are able to achieve at high levels, regardless of their background, regardless of the obstacles that are in their way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was just curious, like, so, I mean, I guess, so, I mean, we're not going for the outcome for
Mm.
350 seniors at Newberg High School, for example, is all over the board.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some kids are
Mm-hmm.
bound for college, and
Sure.
some for high-end colleges, and,
Sure.
you know, Stanford, you know, great places.
Yeah.
Others are bound for military, or they're bound for vocational type work.
Right.
So I guess the equitable outcome, I get it, as far as, like, we want to make sure every student gets the very best Newberg school districts can throw at them, to give them every tool in the bag. I guess I'm just curious about the outcome being equitable, meaning every kid gets the opportunity, but not every kid's going to have the same outcome.
Absolutely. I would say that, the goal, Dave, is to make sure that students have choices. And the choices that they make are the choices based on what they want to achieve, what they want to do in their life, not based on the fact that they can't go to a 4-year university, or can't go to a 2-year university, or can't get into the military, because their achievement and their skills, and I think we need to talk about skills, their skills aren't there yet. And the goal would be, when kids graduate from Newberg High School, we know they have the skills to be able to make the choices that will help them really live a rich life, and give them not just the potential, but the reality of that rich life.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and your second question was about Newberg High School and freshman English. Tell me more. I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Well, I mean, I had several constituents in the town come to me and just asked, pretty upset about freshman English curriculum this year.
Okay.
And they had contacted their principal and teacher and done all the proper channels that way. But I'm just curious if that's from you and the DO that picks that curriculum, or is that the teacher, the admin, or is there a group? Because it was a little bit different, edgy, controversial for these people anyway.
What you're talking about is supplemental curriculum. And for example, yes, the board actually approves curriculum K-12 of what's going to be taught at each level in general, and the resources, like Dr. Brown was talking about, some of the resources that are available right now with distance learning. That's curriculum, right? And that went through a process of vetting, and it goes then to the teachers, and administrators assist in that. Like, basically they're supporting their teachers as they teach that curriculum. Supplemental material means that it may not be part of a curriculum that is like a textbook, but it might be something that really fits with what the team, the PLC, has put together, and they want to make sure that students get a rich resource that is maybe at their reading level, or stretching them as readers, might be at the content and how it works with social studies, right? So that supplemental material, I think, maybe is what you're talking about. And that is really the decision-making of the teachers in the schools of what supplemental material will be used. And so that's to explain the difference between a textbook and the book that you're maybe referring to, which would be what you would consider, you said you considered it controversial.
Well, I mean, they certainly did. I mean, I got asked in person, and got calls and emails, and you know, I asked them first thing, just like we would always do: did you talk to your teacher? Did you talk to your coach? Did you talk to your principal? You talk to your athletic director? You know, everything that we've been through, you know, in the schools, that we want parents to try to go through the steps.
Sure, absolutely.
I did read some of it. I was pretty flabbergasted at the material myself personally. And I'm a lot older than 14, 15, but I told these people I would ask, and so that's why I'm doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that obviously there is a policy that the board has, and that we, as I can talk from a teacher perspective and also an administrator perspective, any student who feels uncomfortable, or family that feels uncomfortable with any of those supplemental materials that the teacher has chosen, will be offered another alternative option. That we don't force students or families to read something or participate in something that is not aligned with their perspective of what is appropriate, right? Anybody can opt out. of curriculum that is a supplemental material.
I would just say to that, I get that, I mean, I've seen that offer too,
Yeah.
even way back in the day.
Mhm.
I would say that these people were kind of pretty far down the path of their student being exposed to stuff in the assignment that they were not comfortable, happy
Mhm.
with.
Mhm.
And the student, itself, I mean, to me, I'm always, I'm student oriented. I think that's why we should all be here.
Mhm.
Alternative assignments fine, but they were already still exposed to this type of curriculum. And that's where these parents were having their hardest time, is because they didn't find out about it until they were pretty far down the road.
I'm going to just bring it back to school opening updates. Karen, thank you. Dave, thank you. It's a good conversation we're having here, and I think it could go on, but I'm going to keep our meeting on track and keep us with the school opening update.
Randy, can you do me a favor then?
Sure.
I get you on the time. Do you want me to email you to get this on a later agenda item so we can finish this conversation?
Yeah, let's definitely have the conversation. Yeah. Joe, do you have anybody else?
We do. We have Anne and Luke. So Anne.
Everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yay. Awesome. I didn't forget the mic this time. I just want to start out by saying I am in awe of how amazing our staff has been, and our administration, both our licensed and our classified staff, all the way down to our custodial staff, our food service. Everybody has just jumped in and made changes in a very short amount of time. I feel like in my lifetime, I will probably never have the opportunity that we are having right now to just really stretch our thinking and for our staff to grow in new ways, and in turn for our students to grow in new ways. So this last week, my staff, mainly our EL, our dual language program, and special education staff have been doing check-ins. They've been talking with their students and getting them placed in particular groups and groupings that make sense. They've been building a lot of student confidence. And within placing students in those groups, our administrators in all of our buildings had to get together and work collaboratively to be able to build a schedule that would work for students who need small group assistance or push-in assistance with EAs. So if you can only imagine the scheduling difficulty that has been. So we had to really take a step back and look at things a little bit differently. So in a typical school year, we might build the school's master schedule and then look for all the openings that we have and figure out where a student might be able to do their speech, or where they might be able to do their small group work, or get some English language development time or reading intervention. And we had to really kind of look at it and think about it in a different or backwards sort of way, because there were so many small groups that needed to occur and so many different individual students that needed special schedules. We had to somewhat put that first on the master schedules and then fill in the rest of the schedules. And I have to tell you, we just have an amazing team, because in my 18 years of education, I have never seen it done that way. So I'm super proud to be working here today. And I had different meetings with all of our specialists this week. And we always do positives at the beginning of our meetings. And this week we had more teachers report how excited they were to see that all of their students had been able to log in those first few days, and that they were successful on their own after that, attending, and that the students were so excited to see each other and see their teachers. And then lastly, we also began our social emotional learning groups this week. So we got to hear from teams about how that went. So students working in small groups, if you can think about doing some counseling and some work in the social emotional areas. They predicted that when we do return to in-person learning, that there's going to be a lot more anxiety from students just because of COVID-19. So we wanted to do, with that prediction, a little more social emotional learning. How do we handle and self-regulate when we need to? How do we take a break if we need to? And we just really wanted to have that proactive approach. So I'm super excited that that started today in our first week of school. And the reports from people were awesome. They even had, siblings trying to sort of join in with the group of maybe a younger sibling. And so we'll need to make some phone calls and work that out. But it was pretty cool to see their excitement.
Any questions for Anne?
Are the IEPs still going on?
Yeah. That's where students are getting much of their specially designed instruction, Rebecca. So some will get it in the small group and some will still get it in the cohort group that they're in, and we're having EAs push in. So we're doing a little bit of both.
Cool.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
And to all of your team members, I know you guys have been working super hard making this happen. So really appreciate all the special ed folks really cranking it out, and all of our EL folks as well. Really a lot of work happening in your department. Luke.
Yeah. Good evening. The last 2 weeks have been the 2 busiest weeks in the history of the tech department, with over 300 help desk tickets opened each week for the last 2 weeks. And we're on pace to do that again this week. Our previous record weeks were about half of that. And that makes sense when you think about how we've added dozens of new digital systems, hundreds of new devices, over 1,000 live Google Meet sessions a day so far without significant incidents, fingers crossed, and an untold number of new workflows and accounts and passwords. On top of all this, some of our key systems like Google Meet are seeing significant weekly updates that require us to change our settings and workflows to keep our staff and students safe. So far, we have deployed over 4,000 Chromebooks and almost 500 hotspots. Due to smoke and fire delays, our device distribution got pushed very close to the start of school, which meant that we found out quite late that there was much more demand for hotspots than we had anticipated from what we saw in the spring. And we found out that we're about 150 short. So we got on the phones immediately and started calling vendors and found the 150 we need, 100 of which showed up yesterday and are already getting handed out to families today. We anticipate the last 50 should arrive by the end of the week. So it looks like we'll be leveling off at around 650 hotspots deployed to our community. In the midst of all this, we've also been working to onboard our new hire, a bilingual technology support specialist. And we are very grateful to have Christian be part of the team. He has been a vital addition to the department, as his phone has been ringing off the hook pretty much nonstop for the last 2 weeks. On the strategic partnerships front, we are so grateful for our mental health partners who have worked really hard to have figured out some creative solutions for meeting the mental health needs of our students. In particular, I want to thank YCAP and Youth Outreach for opening their space in downtown Newberg for therapy visits with our mental health providers. And I want to thank Providence Medical Group, the Community Wellness Collective, and Yamhill County for their efforts to make that a reality. I'm also grateful to so many of our community partners for their financial contributions in these challenging times. The Austin Family Foundation provided funding for CTE at home kits and a distance learning playbook for all our teachers. Providence Newberg funded an initial budget for getting started with our equity work. And as of today, both the cities of Newberg and Dundee have engaged in dialogue about the possibility of contributing to our distance learning needs by sharing a portion of their CARES Act coronavirus relief fund. Hopefully more to come on that soon. Even in the midst of all this, we are continuing to make progress with the School Health Services Planning Grant with the goal of adding more services for our students and possibly families to the Wellness Center at the high school. We've received $60,000 this year to move that work forward. And you'll be hearing from the core planning team a few times throughout this year as we move toward a finalized plan and hopefully your approval of that plan in the spring. Thank you.
Any questions for Luke? Our tech team has done an absolutely amazing, outstanding, incredibly difficult job launching into this as tech teams across the state, of course, but our folks have done just an exceptional job of figuring out and solving problems as they come up. I mean, the tickets that are coming in, they're getting them solved and they're working together as quite an incredible team. So appreciate their work.
I just have
Ron, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a curiosity on either one of you, Luke or Joe. How many districts would have a bilingual tech support guy like we have now? What percentage of our Oregon districts do you think are the ones around us?
I don't know if I know the answer. Joe, do you know that one?
I don't know the answer specifically. I know a few probably do in our larger districts. I know that there was not a little bit of shock, but certainly some congrats on us actually posting one specifically that was about supporting families and that it was bilingual. So we did get some kudos from our folks. There aren't a lot of them out there, which made the hiring it difficult. But in large places, Beaverton, Hillsborough, Salem, possibly, but I don't actually have any real numbers. So I'm not sure if they've hired that directly or if that's just been something they've hired accidentally.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right.
It's, like you said, Joe, incredibly obvious to the board that we have administrators and district cabinet officials who are incredibly dedicated to our students. Thank you.
I really do.
All right, speaking of those people, Nikki, are you ready for your monthly financial report?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Let me pull that up over here. So this month, because we were reporting through August 31st, and there's not a lot that has happened, I went ahead and included some updates on our revenue forecast. And so I don't know if you had a chance to review that a little bit. But to just highlight it some, in the September forecast, they're talking about things looking better than they projected originally. So everything is up from June, not everything, but a good portion of things are up from June, but they are not as high as our March numbers, which our budget is based upon. So it says the shortfalls are smaller than expected, but we are still below the March projections, which the budget was all worked up on. So we're not quite out of the woods yet as far as our current year. And the next bullet just talks about for 2021, they expect SSF to stay whole, measured 98 to stay whole. And they said SIA also, but that's after they've already reduced it to the 30% level. I have not seen anything that says that there's any increase to that or to expect any increase in the current year. And looking down at future budgets, it talks about the reserves staying pretty intact still. So there would be some ability to stabilize in the following biennium. But it does talk about in the 21-23 biennium, there will still be a deficit. And I read through the forecast a little bit, and they're saying the growth, I mean, we've been adding back jobs, but they're lower income jobs. And so the income coming into the state is not rebounding as much as we need it to. And so that's part of that. Let's see. Also in this, I put in the upcoming PERS rates that are going to go to the board or go to the PERS board. And there's a significant decrease in that, and there's a few reasons for that. And so in the last one of the House bill, one of the legislative changes that they made to it, they built in a redirect. So when you're looking at these numbers, it talks about a 2.45 or a 0.70 redirect. That money is being pushed directly over to reduce employer rates. And so that is why you see that's the majority of why those numbers have been reduced that much. Along with the earnings for 2019 were higher than projected. So since we have a side account that also buys down our UAL liability, the earnings on the side account, along with the earnings from the regular system, were better than planned. So between all of those pieces, our number came in lower than expected for that biennium. But it also, there's a piece of it where they reamortized the UAL, so they extended the time of that unfunded liability. And that reduces this rate, but it also kicks the can down the road as like the collared rate also does, where it'll only increase by so much. And so employers can adjust to it. So all those pieces are just extending our debt down the road a bit further. Let's see. Were there any specific questions? I have a few notes here. If anybody has any questions.
I do about that last topic. So what you're telling me is the numbers on the brown on page 36 represent three. I think I heard you say three different things. One, their investments are doing better. There was a third one second one I don't remember. And then the third one was this redirect, which is, the redirect. And then there's the kicking down the road. So those are three. The better investments, whatever the redirect is, which I don't understand yet, and the idea that they reamortized it. So better investments doesn't hurt us right now because it's actually paying for things. Where does the redirect refund, the 2.45%, where is it being redirected from and where to? Oh, that's not the right number, but whatever it is. Where is the redirect being from so it reduces our rates?
So what that number is so the 6% that goes in to the system, once we pay the normal 6%, we forward that to PERS. When it gets there, they take the 2.45 or the 0.7, depending if you're OPSERV or your tier 1, tier 2. Okay. And they apply it against the employer rate to reduce our rate.
So that means our contribution to the reserve has been reduced. Because it's not going to the reserve, it's going to the current.
Right. Yeah, it's not going against the UAL, it's going directly to reduce the current employer rate.
So that also kicks costs down the road, as well as the reamortization. So what percent so 2.5 or 0.7 is part of it. How much of this 6%? Well, yeah, 6 or 5%, depending on which one. How much of that is actually because of the better investment, so that we're not going to have to pay it again later?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up.
Okay.
I don't recall seeing anything in the presentation that delineates those separate pieces and how it impacts. But there might be some detail. I can ask some questions as far as how that breaks down.
I think it's good for us to know. Mm-hmm. It's a long-term problem. Several of us will probably be off the board by the time it becomes a real issue, but it's still a problem for our district. And that is, how much are we actually still paying of our obligations and how much are we deferring to a half a generation later? Because the board will have to plan for that in the long run. And I also, I'm not really comfortable with putting more burden on the future. So I'd like to know the scale of the problem and how much actually was solved by increased returns.
Right. Yeah, I can look in and see if I can get that in more detail. And something else to think about with that, where I could set aside money, matching funds, if districts wanted to put additional money in that side account a little while ago. But they put that on hold with all the reductions in the state and everything. It's something we can look at in the future as we keep transferring money to that PERS, our PERS fund to kind of save up for later. If they rebuild that and put that in place, that is something that we can do later on to bring those rates down for the future. So I think it's, even though the next biennium rates look a little bit lower, they're still expecting the following biennium for it to go back up. And so both on the state revenue side and also the PERS rates, partially because the coloring and all those, once, if the system is funded below 70%, depending on how low it's funded, changes the colored rate. So if we get, to 65 or 60, all of a sudden we're going to have a higher increase because we've got to get back up to a more doable funded amount in the system. So. Any other questions?
Hey,
Dave?
Nikki, I do.
Uh-huh.
I know, like, great job, by the way. You're always so good at this. This year, we're good. Everything's going good. There's talk of another shutdown. So in the future, next year, if we do have a shutdown, a lot of businesses aren't going to be able to make it through another shutdown. So with loss of businesses will mean loss of jobs, revenue. How do we forecast out, like, say, going into the 21-22 year? I know we can't predict that. I mean, I'm not asking you to do something you can't do, but
Right.
it seems like it's, like everything with COVID, it's very precarious. But it's also kind of real right now that if our governor shuts us down, we're going to put our state in quite a bind, which is going to put schools in a bind. Do you have any thoughts at all, looking down the road, how we would have to adjust for that?
Just like we have in the past. I mean, Joe has many years in the system as well, but we just project and we watch those numbers. We watch the estimate. We know our enrollment's down currently. I don't know how quickly that will rebound if we start bringing back a hybrid, bringing kids back in a hybrid. I don't know how many of those will come back fairly quickly. So those are all big question marks we have to keep watching. And again, when we get to the budgeting cycle, when we look ahead to the next year, we're gonna have to make adjustments with staff numbers in relation to student numbers going into the next year, and just keep watching it. I mean, that's all we can do. And that's part of why, especially so this year, when we look ahead and try to build that ending fund balance, I mean, we've been building it over the last couple of years, but you can also see how quickly $1 million goes in a system this big, or even the 2.3 or 4, I forget. And that money goes very, very quickly. So just, growing that a little bit each year. So if we get dinged for a biennium, hopefully we have that reserve to draw on. So we can keep the right balance of staff and students and not have to be in a position where, we have large numbers in the classrooms, or, all those things that we don't want to see. But yeah, I mean, that's all we can do is just keep listening and learning, between all of us, watching the growth in our own area. And with the SIA money, watch that growth as well, because that's contingent on, the building and things like that. So we just have to watch it all and do our best guess with the experience we have, and ask a lot of questions. And we do work with a lot of other school districts around the state, or we talk with a lot of them. So it's, it's a kind of a teamwork deal with our cohorts.
Thanks for all your hard work. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Nikki, in his comments, Joe mentioned the reduction in enrollment. When do you think you'll have a presentation for us on that impact, and how that's going to impact our current and future budgets?
Right. Yeah, we just got those numbers the other day. We can always, just a reminder, as far as we get, were held harmless in the current year. So going into next year, that's where it'll be really important to watch how many kids return as we work through this COVID pandemic thing, because we'll be paid the higher of the 2 years. So if we really drop this year and we start gaining back going into next year, we can be paid at that higher rate for next year. And then it all comes out in the wash that following year when it's reconciled. But yeah, I think next month we can certainly bring those numbers, and we can kind of, at least so you can show the numbers knowing that they're constantly moving. And the second we, go to hybrid, who knows if those numbers will come back and how significantly they'll come back. I think it's a guessing game for all of us because we haven't been here before.
All right. Thank you, Nikki. In the spirit of time, I'm going to keep us on track, but Nikki is always incredibly responsive. So if you all have further questions or clarifications, please reach out. Yeah. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have a bond update from Greg and Joe.
Okay, thank you. I'll start, and then I'm sure Greg will fill in all the real good information in the background. So it's been great to do a few presentations. I've been focusing on our 3 or 4 main areas that the bond will focus on, and that's around health and safety, updating and upgrading our classrooms or our schools, and then modernizing classrooms for our future work. Additionally, as Bob mentioned earlier, things on health and safety include other items for resiliency, also improving accessibility to our schools. We have a lot of ADA upgrades that we're also looking at doing. There will be a website coming soon. That's our official school district website. The PAC later tonight will talk about theirs, but we will actually have an official website coming very soon, and we'll get that information out to people. They'll be able to see the bond projects by school and get a better idea of those details. There will be renderings on there, so pictures of possible schools. I want everybody to know that these are conceptual only, no decisions have been made. I know people want to go after that, but we have to have something so you can get an idea of what the buildings might look like. So those are conceptual drawings, and you'll be able to see a conceptual drawing of what a new elementary like Dundee would be. And there are also some conceptual drawings on the addition that would be made if the bond were passed to Edwards, and some of the modernization of just the front. So there are just a few of those. We do have multiple meetings coming up. So we have a couple, both Rotaries in town, Kiwanis, the Seroptimus group has invited us, the Newberg Education Foundation, our parent leader groups, and then finally we will have some general public meetings that will be scheduled soon, and then we'll get that information out. We want people to be able to come and listen and ask questions. I want to make sure we can get as much information out there to the public as possible. So I think it's been going along well. We've been working very diligently to get some things together with our consultants, and making sure that we can get the information out to the public. One thing I did want to highlight, that a question has come up a few times around the spending of the money. By law, there is a citizen oversight, bond oversight committee comprised of citizens who are provided regular reports of the spending and the progress of the projects. That's something that is actually a really valuable and important part of this. And so I want folks to know that there is a full citizen oversight committee that then reports to the board what's happening in the process. So lots of things getting underway, and I'll let our PAC talk about some of the other parts going on, but I do want to hand it over to Greg because he's actually been involved in many of these aspects as well.
Yeah, Joe covered the big swing of things really well. Just to give you an idea of some of the specifics we have coming up, by the end of the week, we should have the informational website from the district up and running. And so we'll be getting that out to all parents and community members so they can see that, and you can share that around with other folks as well so they can see it. We have been working on, I will also be working to get something out to all of our staff and to our board members that will be especially for our staff, here are the things that you can and can't say as a part of this process in the bond, because as state employees, we are not allowed by law to advocate in any way for a bond measure. We can only inform. And so we want to have some clear instructions to our staff for what that looks like. And we'll also have talking points for you as board members to be able to share when you're talking with the community. And those are in the works, and we're waiting to kind of get them finalized back from some of our consultants. And as soon as I have those, I'll make sure that you have those so that you'll be ready to go. Next Wednesday at 7 p.m., we're going to be doing a Zoom meeting with our parent leaders, where we're going to give them a chance to kind of ask any questions that they have, because we know that they'll be able to get the word out to lots of folks. We will follow that up with an open Zoom webinar to anyone in the community or any parent, where we will have a presentation on the bond. And we're working on having similar things at some of our local retirement communities so that they can get information as well. So those are some of the things that we are working on, and we will be rolling out in the weeks ahead. And I really advocated for Director Pyro's statue in front of the new Dundee rendering, but you know, the brick just wouldn't go for that. I don't know why. So maybe that'll be part of the later process, Rebecca.
She's got to crowdsource that. All right, any questions specifically for Joe and Greg in relation to the district bond information? We're going to have Lydia and AJ speaking more of the PAC advocacy side of it. So any questions for Joe and Greg? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right,
Thank you.
let's see, Lydia and AJ, you guys are up. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Well, thank you for inviting us to present. We're grateful to be able to share about the efforts being made to promote this much needed bond. As you know, a political action committee is a group of community members organized to support a school district bond measure. Newberg School District can provide information about Measure 36205. The PAC can raise funds and advocate for the measure in the community. The PAC, Citizens for Newberg and Education, is a PAC that was formed many, many years ago to support previous bond measures by citizens from who might have been involved back in the day. It's changed leaderships a few times, and myself and AJ have taken on the role of co-chairs. So a little while ago, we made the official transition of powers with the Secretary of State, and then we got right to work with the help of Brandy on our endorsements and measures of arguments in support of the measure for the voters pamphlet. So we did 5 arguments of support that were endorsed by, and I can share our list of endorsements with you guys. These are our signed on endorsements that we got from many local government officials and parent and community leaders, business owners, civic leaders, entrepreneurs. The Newberg Education Association provided their own statement of support, and Bob Woodruff also supplied his own statement of support. And we have one Spanish statement of support in the voters pamphlet to hopefully reach some of the voters that might not speak English or read English. And then next we formed our steering committee. And so these are our members. We've got myself and AJ as the leadership, and then Brandy and Brittany Magayans is heading up our education and outreach. We've got Autumn Foster, Lisa Barnes, and Rod Federwish, who are helping with our communications and marketing. And then Emily Garrick-Steenson, Bob Woodruff, Rebecca Pyros, and Carr Biggerstaff are heading up our fundraising team. They've been hard at work raising funds to provide yard signs, other banners, and other signage that we want to place around town, as well as hopefully sending out some mailers to our voter group. And then AJ, I think, will take over from here.
Our outreach and education group has been very busy connecting with all of the different parent groups. Because it is social distancing times, we're having to approach things differently. There's not a lot of district meetings or anything that we could go to gatherings. So it's trying to collect folks to be willing to meet online. Parent groups are a great place to start. There's been a lot of great questions. People have been very supportive. They've asked why now? They've asked why isn't it more? So it's doing a lot of relational work that then they can take that information out to the rest of the community. We're also looking at during October, maybe hosting, if folks who are advocates can want to have their own little gatherings, that people from the steering team can attend those as well and share information. We've also got a group that has been doing a phenomenal job on communications and marketing. They've rolled out a website. Oh, look, there it is. With awesome graphics. We've got videos. Probably shouldn't watch the whole thing.
No, I'll just let it play for a little.
And I think a number of you have seen it since we've reached out and asked you to share it. Thank you for doing that. One way that's been pretty effective to get the word out is on social media. So we've got, this is our, some of the posts from our Facebook page. I think we're up past 100 followers in a pretty short time. So that's been really encouraging. We've also got an Instagram page. And we have some personal testimonies. And we'll keep creating more material like that and sharing that message. So one of our messages is just the bond will fund improvements for safety, security, and pandemic health at every building. And the fact that it's at every building has been something that folks have really resonated with. And then we have 35 days left until Election Day. And so we've got some work to do. These are some of the important dates that we are letting folks know about. And we will be reaching out to all of you to ask to help with this effort as you can. And if you have questions, you can ask or email.
Thank you, Lydia and AJ. Are there any questions from the board? I think, you know, like over half the board is active, super active in the pack, so that helps.
That's why it felt a little funny to give this presentation, because I'm talking with you guys all the time, so it's not necessarily new.
Everybody needs to be on.
We so appreciate all of the work that you've done, especially when it seems like it's last minute. That's been something that has been really encouraging. We've recognized how much Newberg cares about their schools. People are willing to, we send an email and within like 10 minutes, they'll send back a response. Yeah, I'd love to help, you know, and they'll just roll out with whatever request we have. So, and especially during social distancing times, it's really encouraging to have this kind of project to work on for our future when we get to gather back together. And it kind of, I don't know, speaks to that hope and how much we care about our community.
Yeah. Any questions?
And nice timing. Sorry.
Okay, this is it. We're all at home. We've got children and dogs and everything happening. Stink bug
Just
invasion.
one comment, if I may, just thank everybody who's been working with the PAC. I know that's a lot of work. And I appreciate both the community and the board support in working on the PACs. I know that's an additional time. AJ and Lydia have been the team to beat, and so they've been out really working very hard. So I wanted to thank them both. And I know Lydia had a lot of fun trying to get the Secretary of State stuff done, all those things done, and AJ getting out there. So appreciate the two of you, and of course all the folks who are part of that PAC.
Yeah, we have a really great team.
Yep.
That's great. All right, well, I don't see any questions. So thank you, ladies, for coming and presenting to us tonight. I will talk to you tomorrow, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, next up on the agenda, we have an update from our ad hoc committees. let's see, Rebecca and Bob, would you mind giving us an update on the calendar start time committee?
No, not at all. Yeah, so Rebecca, myself, and Brian Shannon are on this committee. We met, Rebecca and I were able to meet. Brian wasn't able to make it to, we had a Google Meet to go over, and I sent it out to the board just at the start of the meeting to come up with a draft of the charter for this committee. And I've never done screen sharing, so I'm going to try screen sharing here just to pull up that. It's pretty straightforward. Is this showing on folks' screen? Does anybody hear me?
Yeah,
We all hear you.
Okay, is this showing up on your screen?
No.
Okay, then I'll go to just normal talking. Basically, we came up with a draft charter. The purpose is to provide the Newberg School District Board of Directors with a recommendation on changing school start times for all primary and secondary schools in the district. Rebecca and I had a good conversation about, membership, who should be on a committee like that. We felt, 3 board members, since we have 3 already. A representative from First Student would be helpful because transportation is going to be a significant logistical issue. 2 NEA representatives. Sorry, I'm new to doing the screen sharing thing.
We can see it now, though.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
2 NEA representatives, 2 OSEA representatives, 2 admin, and 4 parent representatives. At the meeting, and I haven't changed it yet, but at the meeting, Rebecca and I were talking about, she really believed it would be helpful to have a representative from the Hispanic parent group. And we also thought it would be helpful to have somebody from one of the other school-based parent groups. He wasn't able to make it to the meeting tonight, but Brian Shannon felt like this was too bulky already. There were too many members, and he wanted to see a smaller group. I know he's not here, but this is something where we're going to make a major change that's going to impact every single student in the district. This is something where getting as much input as possible, I think, is going to be much more helpful. A small committee is an implementation committee when you need to be quick and limber. But when we're not implementing a decision, when we're trying to come up with input towards a decision, the more people that we have involved, the more voices, having voices that are in opposition to each other at this point of the game will really help flesh out a recommendation that's more successful. He also had a concern that there's, at least as it stands now, there's an even number of representatives on there. It comes out to 14. And he felt like that could deadlock the committee. Again, I wouldn't dig my heels in on that one, but again, this is a committee to give a recommendation. So a 7-7 vote would be as meaningful to me as a board member as an 8-7 vote. I don't see where it would deadlock the committee. It would show where there was a difference of opinion. We talked about responsibilities, making it clear that this committee's role is to come up with a recommendation. It's the board of directors' role to decide if we're going to move forward and then how we do that. But we're really trying to continue on this theme that we've had for the past several years of really trying to be more open and inclusive in how we do our work, more seeking more and really giving more weight to community input than we had been for several years. So that's a major thrust of why we're doing these ad hoc committees. I put in there the committee would meet at its discretion and that they would hold a minimum of 2 public meetings. Again, Director Shannon was concerned that was too open-ended. He wanted to see a commitment to a once-a-month meeting. And this is one I'm open to, very curious about feedback from the board, when to put the deadline. I put that they will deliver a written report no later than July 31st. And, I was trying to think what's enough time to give them adequate time to do research, collect input, come up with a good recommendation, but not send it too far down the line so that this takes an unreasonable amount of time. And that's kind of what we talked about. And I don't know if folks have any questions or input now or want to think about it and share that with Chair Penner later on once they've had a chance to think about it some more.
I have two questions, I think.
Yeah.
I noticed the 2 NEA and 2 OSEA representatives. I don't know if you said, it might have slipped past me, but will it be designed so there'll be one in elementary and one in secondary in each of those?
Yeah, that was my assumption. I didn't want to pen it in there, not knowing their availabilities. And, I didn't want to get bogged down in that.
But I think it's important.
That's certainly
I think that their interests are going to likely be somewhat in tension with each other, and a decision that's made without a voice from each side in that divide will have more trouble being accepted no matter what it is, or a recommendation, let's put it that way. So I would like to see those be balanced in terms of who we represent from the staff. The other one was about the timing, and I'm speculating here. Well, I'm trying to use my memory, but it's so bad I might as well be speculating. When we first started talking about this, there was sort of a horizon by which this needs to be resolved if it's going to be implemented the following year. And that horizon, as I recall, was like somewhere in the fall, late fall, November-ish or something. I might be making this up, Joe or somebody. I think you probably were in on that conversation. Do you remember how that went? And that would have a bearing. It's already kind of late to cram through this process for our November. July seems like so far off.
It does.
But if the November is the deadline, I don't know if there's any cost. But if it actually could be done in a decision in February or March, that's what I'd like to know. And maybe Joe or somebody could help.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if we wanted to implement next year any kind of a change for start times, we would probably need that by the end of January, if possible. And I think you could probably do that with the group. This is not a huge group, because we want to give families time. If there's going to be a change, we want to give them time to readjust their lives. And we're already fully adjusted into whole other things, so it may not be quite as much of an adjustment. But we want to make sure that we're able to get those changes in there, working with our bus group. That'll be a whole reorganization as well. So I would say if we got it by the end of January, we could still do it. And you could probably do that in a few meetings, Bob. I think you could probably get through that. And to speak to the other point about if you were going to go to an odd number, I would suggest adding another parent representative, just to balance out your committee a little bit, because you have a lot of district folk on there, or board members, and so you may want to consider adding one more parent if you were going to get to a place where you wanted to have 15. I agree with you that a split vote from your committee would really probably tell you more about where people are than closer to unanimous. But yeah, if we got it by the end of January, we'd be able to implement for the following year if there were changes the committee recommended to the board.
You mean if the board got its decision made by the end of January?
Right.
So they would need to be done December, probably. Because I don't know if it's going to be a one meeting deal for us.
And I'm a personal supporter of switching the times. I think I've read the science, and I think it's something I really want to see done. But like I said earlier, this is something that's going to touch every single student in the district. I would much rather we did it well than did it quickly. If it took us an extra year to get this in place, that wouldn't be the end of the world. As eager as I am to see it happen.
Okay.
I mean, I think the one thing I would comment is that we have been talking about it for a while, and I know that we pushed it to actually have a committee for it. But I mean, it is a perfect time because there's so much change right now. Kind of a perfect opportunity to make it happen.
Yeah, that was kind of one of the things actually Rebecca and I talked about. Is like, wouldn't it be great if we could just do it quickly enough that it happened before we went back physically to school. That seems unrealistic. Hopefully that's unrealistic. We'll be back sooner than we could move on this. But yeah, you're right. This does provide us with a time when folks are more used to change.
So Bob, you're the committee, and I don't want to bend your work too much because I'm not on the committee. I haven't been part of that conversation, but we've just had a little conversation here where Joe seemed to think it was doable by the end of January.
Yeah, and I actually already have a meeting scheduled with Joe to discuss this actually tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think that'll shed a lot of light on give us more time to talk about the timeline, and I can report back to the board about that.
And I'll say that I'm initially a skeptic because maybe I haven't read the same science as you've read, but so I'm not saying anything here to try to delay it or defer it, but if we are going to do it, if the decision was made to do it, this has been in response to people asking for us to deal with this for years, well, a year and a half at least in the last round. And I'd rather have, I don't, even though I'm skeptical, I don't want to delay it. I think the decision needs to get made. And if we do it, we should be doing it as soon as we reasonably can to be faithful. I don't know if you can hear all that. I dropped the part that has the microphone in it.
We could hear you.
Okay. You've heard enough of me anyway, so sure.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
Hey, I agree with Inez. I think it's like and I agree with you too. I think this is something I've heard for a long time. And the timing would be awesome to do it in our next transition. You know, I heard yesterday from another school district that it could be Christmas of 21 before we actually are back in the classroom. Who knows? But I agree with Inez. I think it's like a great time. We've been through so much change. I think the benefits far outweigh the negative. Is always going to affect somebody, but I appreciate all you guys' work on this, you know, and but again, I agree with Inez. I think it's something we should try to do before we go back into brick and mortar learning for the kids, because it would be a natural transition and be easier than it would if we try to do it after all this change and then, you know, then get back in school and then try to change something again. Hopefully when we go back, we'll be kind of solid. That's all I had, Bob.
Yeah, no, I'm with everybody who would like to see this happen while we're out of school. My biggest concern with doing it quickly is my biggest fear is that we would do it, it would not work, and then we'd switch back. That would create a lot of chaos and a lot of stress on folks, and quite rightly reflect poorly on us as a board and our ability to implement things. So I'm with you on the sense of wanting to do it, but I really want to see this done well, and we'll talk more very shortly about timelines, because it sounds like that's really the biggest question about our charter here.
Okay, great. Thank you. I look forward to hearing about it. Okay. That's good for start time committee? Anything else, you guys? Okay. So Inez, Ron, and I are on the equity committee, and Inez or Ron, would you like to speak to that and what we've been up to? We didn't decide who would speak at our last meeting, so that's why we're all pausing.
I'm going to stand on no surprises in this case because I didn't know that I might have to speak. I'm going to let you guys take the lead on that. I'll fill in.
Okay.
Go for it, Brandy. I'll help you too.
All right. Yeah, it's a community effort. Okay. Well, the equity committee has been meeting once a week for the last 2 or 3 weeks. We have a kind of standing Friday morning meeting. And so far it's just Ron and Inez and I, but what we have been trying to develop is kind of the criteria for an applicant procedure. You know, how do we ensure that we're reaching a lot of different people in our community and getting into those groups? And how do we ensure a fair application process in the case of if we have more applicants than we expect on the committee? And what did we say, 12? What was the size 12 people?
We were looking at 12 as a possible number, yes. I don't think it's a hard number.
Yeah, no, it's not. Nothing's hard right now on it. But we have also reached out to try to get support and figure out what else is going on in the district. So we met with both Casey Petrie and Cass Thornstead to learn about what the district sort of equity, what did they call them? What is that group called again?
The Anti-Racist Collective.
Thank you. Anti-Racist Collective, and kind of see what they're up to. And so we spent a bit of time just trying to evaluate kind of what is already going on in the district and kind of what this specific committee's sort of overarching aim would be. You know, how does it fit into the role of the Board of Governance, really? And then from there, we started reaching out. I have a meeting tomorrow, or we have a meeting tomorrow morning with the what is ELL and equity coordinator of the Corvallis School District, because they've had a standing committee on this since 2012 to find out sort of how they recruited members, things that worked, things that didn't work, and sort of what, you know, it's evolved from. Luckily for us, in some ways, there are a lot of school districts that have been doing this for a long time. And so there's a lot of information on district websites as far as their language around charters, their language around the sort of memberships and makeup of the committee, things like that. So right now we're really in kind of that research phase of how do we really purposely and intentionally build this equity committee. What did I miss?
I think you got everything. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, and we're utilizing our resources as much as we can, because we're also not trying to double dip if something's already being covered. So
We have been meeting, so far there's a pattern of meeting on Friday mornings, so we're doing a weekly meeting. And then people, mostly Brandy so far, have been doing these extra little legwork meetings that she's talking about, so that we're trying to make progress. I think our goal from last meeting was at this meeting, we would have our decisions made about how we'd like to constitute the committee. And so we could start looking for our members after this week.
we do want to make sure that the charter itself is defined by the committee members, not just us three. So we're gonna outline a blurb, but then the committee will decide what it'll actually be working on.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out what our recruitment language should be at this point, because we definitely are trying to be very conscientious of this. We're sort of the start of this, but we're by no means the full drivers of this. Yeah, any questions?
Brandy, you mentioned some sort of an application procedure, and that's a good point, because, you know, except for our budget committee, we really, in my time on the board, this is a new thing that we're doing, is, you know, working with board level committees. Are you all looking at coming up with a form or a procedure, like how we could do that? Quite frankly, that we could borrow for the start time committee, because I think long term that would be a good thing to have a set process for how folks join these committees.
Yeah, that's a good question. And yes, we are trying to work on developing it, and we will certainly share it. Yeah.
Brandy, have you been in contact with Karen with the work she's been doing for the district?
Not Karen specifically, and she could be a good person, right? The first couple of weeks, we're really just trying to figure out, to get a picture of what is happening in equity work around the district. And so we have a fairly loose picture of that at this point, because luckily there's a lot of work going on at the building levels, at the administration levels, at voluntary staff levels. I mean, a lot. So we've also talked a lot about, do we want to have members that overlap so we can have those channels of communication open between committees, or is it just, you know, an open of they come sometimes see what we're doing and we go sometimes see what they're doing? We don't know yet. That's kind of the whole idea of trying to get the members and then come to consensus on how we want to approach that. Yeah. Anything else? We'll keep you all updated. Okay, let's move on to new business and our new added A, the classified contract. Joe, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you. We have completed our negotiations process with OSEA, our classified members, who also have voted to ratify I appreciate all of the time that their members and their leadership put into it. I think it is an excellent agreement for us. I think I hope it shows how much we value the work that they do for us, and they've done an incredible amount of work. Again, appreciate the leadership, my team as well, that spent a lot of time and energy on this, and we feel very good about the contract where we have finalized it, and so we present to you today for a vote to approve.
Can I ask either Joe or Nikki if you know for the minutes when the Classified Association ratified the contract? I know they had the vote just recently. Do you know the date for that?
I will tell you in just a moment.
I believe it was Tuesday, but I'm sure Joe has evidence.
No, it was a little bit later.
Rebecca, do you remember?
I know it was last week sometime.
Yeah, it
Wednesday.
actually, the final vote wasn't until Friday, so they left the polls open. So Friday is when we received the final information of them passing. So I received a communication from Sandy Byers, their president, on Friday of the ratification.
Do we
Are
have
there
any
questions? Go ahead.
Do we have any specific wording we need to approve this?
I did email to all the board members something that I pulled from previous approvals and then updated the dates on those.
Okay.
Bob, you look like you're pulling that up.
Yeah.
I have it. I'll move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors ratify the collective bargaining agreement between Newberg School District 29J and the Oregon School Employees Association, Chapter 17, effective July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023.
I second.
Okay, with a motion and second, is there discussion? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And it passes unanimously. All right, thank you
very
for
much.
Yeah, thank you
Yes.
for your work on that and for bringing it for us in a timely manner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Dr. Brown is back up for the SIA plan revisions.
Okay, thank you. Greg is going to share the screen so that I can try to, or share ownership so I can do this part. There we go. All right. I'm sure Dr. Knapp is pleased with the number of tabs I have open right now, so I'll just jump right in here. Let me back up a little bit. Thanks very much for the time tonight. I'm going to just take a few minutes to give you an update on our work with the Student Success Act and the Student Investment Account, which is the money part of the Student Success Act for school districts. You probably recall going all the way back to a year ago that we've had a few conversations with you talking about our process for collecting input from our community and taking a look at our data to come up with a plan that we felt like makes the most sense and would really help us make improvements in key areas. And then back in March of this year, which feels like about a decade ago now, you all actually approved our plan, which we then submitted to the state, and the state approved, and we were sort of getting ready to get the ball rolling on everything. And then the world changed pretty significantly shortly thereafter, and we've all been in a bit of a holding pattern since then. So a number of things have happened at the state level with regard to the amount of money that is going to be invested and what our portion in Newberg of that would be. So purpose of this presentation is to sort of walk you through what the budget currently looks like and some decisions that we'd like to make relative to sort of scaling back our student investment account planning, and then ask you all to approve that. So just as a reminder, the primary purpose of the student investment account is really twofold. One, help support and meet students' mental and behavioral health needs. And then secondly, and equally important, increase achievement and reduce academic disparities for students of color, students with disabilities, bilingual students, and generally students who may have been underserved in the past. So those continue to be the goals of these dollars. As we went through our process, going back now a year ago, we put together a plan using our data, using the input that we had received from our community and from staff. And it really fell into three buckets for us: mental and behavioral health supports and safety, academic instruction and interventions, and additional classroom supports. Those continue to be, even though we've had to scale back the budget quite a bit, those continue to be the three buckets that we would like to invest these resources in. And we are also maintaining the three primary outcomes that we're hoping for all students here are to increase those supports, increase growth in the core content areas, and increase graduation rates. So again, even though the money is being scaled back a little bit for this first go round with SIA, we are maintaining the buckets that we think are the most important places to put it and the outcomes. So on this slide, just to give you a sense of what the cuts look like, originally the estimated funding for Newberg was going to be just a little bit over $4 million. And based on that initial plan that we put together that the board had approved, that was going to get us 41.5 FTE across those buckets, if you will. With the revised estimates that ODE's put out, we're looking at just a little bit over 1.2 million, and I'll show you the specific positions that we'd like to move forward with, but that'll end up meaning about 12.1 FTE. And so as you can see, and as Nikki referred to earlier, that's about a 70% cut in funding and roughly the same in terms of the FTE. So we've been engaging in lots of conversations with the cabinet level administrators. We've included our principal and sort of broader leadership team to help us understand what would be the best or what would make the most sense in terms of using 30% of this funding. What positions do we want to go ahead and move forward with this time around? And so I've listed those here. I'll walk through them just very quickly. With the exception of one of these are all positions that you've already seen and heard about and approved in our first plan. So there's nothing new here, although it's just a lot less of it. The licensed therapist for FTE, that would be 3 at the elementary level and 1 at the secondary level. And just as a reminder, that is really a great opportunity where through a partnership with Lutheran Community Services, they're agreeing to pay half of the salary of those folks. So I think the original plan, we had 1 in each school, and we've scaled that back to 4. And we'll continue to be able to utilize that really great partnership that Newberg's had, I think, for quite a while, and that Dr. Neff continues to work with. I also want to say on that particular set of FTE, our plan right now is to not hire those therapists right away while we're in a comprehensive distance learning space. We're going to remain optimistic and hopeful that hopefully by the end of the first semester, we're able to start bringing kids back to school. Of course, we obviously don't know if that is going to be the reality yet or not. But if so, it would be around that time that we'd probably want to make those hires. We think that students being in school is going to be the best way to really utilize the therapist most effectively. So if we get to the middle of the year and it looks like we're not going to be able to come back this year at all, and we're going to stay in the CDL model till the end of the year, we would likely need to have some conversations and maybe come back to you all and repurpose the dollars that are allotted there, and then maybe look at hiring those therapists in year 2 of SIA, which would be the following year. Drug and alcohol counselor at the secondary level, 2.5 FTE of counselors. Those are at the elementary level as well. Math TOSA, again, these are positions that you know about. 1.5 FTE of English language development teachers. 0.5 FTE for at-risk student support at the alternative high school Catalyst, and 0.6 FTE for speech language support for students. You've heard a couple of people reference earlier this evening the bilingual help desk technician position, which has been a really fantastic add, I think, for the school district and the community. And so we would like to include funding for that position in SIA. And that was not included in the original plan that you saw, which is fine. I just want to make sure to call that out so that you know that other than the budget reduction, that is one piece that's a little different. So again, that position's been hired, and he's jumped right in and been busy right away helping support families in our district and doing really great work. So it's a really wonderful thing for the community. Just in terms of the distribution of those resources, and then thinking back to those buckets that we talked about. In the original plan, it was a little bit more evenly distributed than it here is, but under the revised plan, you see that we've got about 55% of the resources would be going toward mental behavioral health supports, another 40% or so going to academic instruction and interventions, and then about 5% going to other classroom supports. And that's actually primarily the bilingual help desk technician piece. And then here, you can get a bit of a breakdown for what this means relative to licensed, classified, and otherwise. So these percentages changed a little bit with the reduction. So there's a little bit more significant portion going toward licensed, about just under 80% of the dollars, and 7.1 of the 12.1 FTE, which is almost 60% of the FTE. 64,000. Again, that's the help desk technician salary, which represents 5% of dollars and 8% of the FTE. And then the therapists are the $200,000 under professional services. So you can see how those distributions changed a little bit. And then finally, we talked a little bit about what does this mean in terms of how we're serving elementary, middle, and high school. And again, these percentages change a little bit from the original plan. You can see here that about 62% of the budget and 64% of the 12.1 FTE goes to elementary, and then smaller percentages at middle and high school. So there is those are a little different than they were before. But I would say that in the original plan, we did have a little bit more emphasis at the elementary level than we did at middle and high school. So that part remains consistent for us. And there we go. In terms of next steps, we are asking for you to take a look at this tonight and hopefully approve it. And then we'll resubmit to ODE, have a deadline of doing that by October 15th. And then the next thing that happens after that, and I don't know exactly when it will happen, I hope that ODE will turn it around fairly quickly. In phone conversations with them, they've shared that they are trying to move these things through pretty quickly, but they will give us a grant agreement, and it is a requirement that we bring the grant agreement to you all for review and approval as well. So there will be at least one more conversation where you'll have a chance to take a look at the grant agreement from ODE and give us your approval on that. And then once that's done, we can sign it and jump into the work. We will be putting together quarterly reports for ODE on how this work is going. And I believe the first one is due in January. So we'll be in active conversations about how things are working out and how we're tracking our metrics against these positions that we'd like to move forward with. So that's all I have for you for the SIA update, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Derek, I've got a quick question. Can you go back to the previous slide, please?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah. So, seeing that it is weighted heavily in the elementary category, how much did that change because of the reduction? Like, was it always going to be more heavily weighted towards elementary, or did we make reductions specifically in secondary?
No, it was always a little bit more heavily weighted toward elementary, and I can get you the specific numbers if you want to see that. I think the adjustment here is that there's just a little bit less at middle and a little more at high school. So some of these positions, if they're hired, just to be transparent about how I calculated that, positions that were hired to serve some kind of district function K-12, I spread those costs by a third across each of the levels, just to be able to show you that wasn't a requirement from the state. There are no minimums or anything like that required from the state. We really get to design the plan that we think is best and then present it. Yes, so we originally were weighted a little bit more heavily toward elementary, and we talked about that as a leadership team about if you look at things like the quality education model and things like that, you do see lots of support for if you're going to put a little bit more resource in any place. Elementary makes a lot of sense, so we felt good about that. Certainly hope, as Nikki referred to earlier, that as we move forward that we might see the full funding for SIA come around, hopefully in the next biennium or two. And then we'd be able to look at a lot of those other positions that we talked about and get a little bit more even distribution.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the board? Yeah. Bob, you unmuted, so I thought maybe you had a question.
No, I was going to make a motion.
Okay.
Move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors approve the revised SIA plan as presented.
I'll second.
Oh, Inez did? Okay, Inez seconds.
Sorry, beat you to it.
Yeah.
And that mute button.
Too old, too slow.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And pass it. Rebecca, could you raise your hand, raise? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Passes unanimously. Thank you, Derek.
Thanks very much, everyone. We'll be back in the coming months to report out on this work.
I have a feeling there'll be lots of changes as we go forward in this uncertain economic time.
Yes.
Thank you for your work
Thanks
on
again.
it. Okay, let's see. So it's 9:11. Next up on the agenda is the superintendent evaluation, but it is our break time. So is the board comfortable with taking a 5-minute break, coming back and doing the superintendent evaluation conversation? Yeah. Okay, great. So 5-minute break. Please come back at 9:17. All right, one more minute. Rebecca, I had no idea about the statue in front of Dundee. That sounds like that needs to be a board, a board decision. I'm kidding.
I texted Reed, everybody needs to remind me not to ad lib.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like it. Breaks it up a little bit.
We have a policy about naming facilities, but we don't have a statute policy. So that's wide open territory.
Oh, that's fun. All right, we're at 17, and in the spirit of keeping us on some kind of track tonight, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So calling us back to order. All right, next up on our agenda is the superintendent evaluation criteria and process. So last meeting, we had two criteria to go off of, the one that we've traditionally had, and then the one that OSBA has done as an update. I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at those or if there's conversation around that. What are some thoughts?
I had a chance to read both of them, and I really like the OSBA. I like the time frame, the structure, and also the 4 points of choosing how is he doing on this criteria.
Mm-hmm.
I was very impressed with the outline of it all, and it was something that we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
We all have so much free time right now. I think
I looked at them both too, and so there's two parts to this in my way of looking at it. OSBA has given us some tools or some. Well, first of all, it's given us an outline or a timeline. That's what I'm looking for, which I already mentioned. I'd like us to use their timeline or something close to it. I don't think we need to have quarterly updates. That's a lot of busy work, but 3 times a year would be good or something like that. Certainly update is a good idea. But otherwise, I really like the timeline. I also like the way they've structured it with the 4 checkpoint or kinds of reviews or aspects of the review that Rebecca was referring to. I also looked at their standards-based review. What we have now, the instrument we've used the whole time I've been on the board is basically a different version of a standards-based review with the the leadership and communication and all that stuff. At first, I was unhappy with the OSBA one because it skims over some details. It puts us at a much higher level of analysis. The categories that they're looking for are more general and broader than the ones we have. They pretty much cover everything that is in the old one, although it's reorganized and it's a little hard to tell. And some of the details that's in the older one are definitely dropped off. Yeah. I think the reason I liked the details is it gave me something to actually look for, whereas some of the general statements in OSBA standards are hard for me to know how we'd know. They address that by the evidence as part of the student superintendent self-evaluation. They give us some similar kinds of markers that we could use or that Joe could use in giving us a report. And so their version requires us to fill in the details of what we actually look for to know whether Joe's being a good leader or whatnot, instead of just the broad categories. And I think I'd be comfortable going all the way over to the OSBA one. I'm a little bit, I'd feel more comfortable about that if we really do decide to use some kind of evidence-based work, either the way that they recommend have the superintendent basically embed it in his report to us or whatnot. I don't want to get real dependent on the superintendent for all of our information like we used to be with Dr. Kim. So if we do that, I really would like to see us do some kind of feedback from staff, which is the 4th one of their tools and their most optional one, as the way they describe it, because it is hard. It is a bit of work. They don't necessarily mean everybody. They say you can target, and so that might make it more doable. But I'd like to have I'd like to have two eyes on this so that we can get a little bit of parallax or something rather than just one in terms of where we get our information from. So I guess where I'm standing right now is I'd like to go to the new one, particularly if we can do something to make sure we get sort of granular information and we're not stuck trying to make judgments about pretty broad categories or standards.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I was looking through some of them, there's a couple I think we should maybe even reword a little bit to make it more applicable, not only to us, but also to the year that we have, right? I mean, this is a sort of document that doesn't clearly reflect like distance learning, for example, or I don't know. I think we need to, I agree with you, Ron. I think we should not only sort of use the broader base of evaluation as far as like reaching out to staff, but I think we could word it a little bit differently too, so that there were more tangible, measurable points.
You point to a good, that's a good feature that helps us, we can help us understand what they're going for here. We've always had these two lists, and when I first got on the board, I didn't know why I had two, but the two are supposed to be the standards and the goals. The standards are every year you measure them on this, and the goals are what it's supposed to be what the board defines with the superintendent at the beginning of the cycle as to what it's going to be reviewed on, the goals for that year. And where you have a particular unique year, you probably want to call them the goals for the year rather than the standards for all time, unless we decide that we're going to continue to have pandemics and we want a pandemic capable superintendent as a permanent thing. The problem with, I don't know, it's an interesting issue for us because we are halfway through the year, or more than a little bit more than halfway through the cycle, about halfway through the cycle, and we're just now defining it. So we have every opportunity, I suppose, to define coping with COVID. But had we done, well, last year we would have been in COVID already, so maybe we could have put it there. You don't really want to stick goals on top of the superintendent without notice. That's why you start early, so the superintendent has a fair basis to work on it for the whole year. But I think if we had unique situations like COVID, we would generally stick them in the goals section, and that changes every year basing on what the goals are for that year.
Well, like, for example, on standard 1, the second bullet says leads the diverse stakeholder involvement in the development and revision of the district's continuous improvement plan based on the district's mission and vision. I do not expect that Joe has deviated from our continuous improvement plan. However, I don't imagine that's where his energy is at the moment. And so I think, not even the moment, I think since probably, last March. And so I would hate to have some of these things that we're trying to judge on that just through the fault of reality haven't necessarily happened like they traditionally would.
I understand. And we would have to, we'd have to be, as a board, we'd have to be context sensitive in how we evaluated him on things. So if we were to evaluate him 2 years ago on his COVID response, we would have to say, nothing's happening there. But
are you ready for a pandemic any second?
I don't know. We should have asked him when we hired him. I don't remember asking him that question.
That was not in the interview questions. I just want to be clear. So it was not a current expectation.
So, I mean, the point is that the goals is where you put what we're working on now. And when you have something come up in the middle of the year, I mean, we could put, as maybe in the standards, it ought to be there, adaptability to crises, because that could happen any year. That would be something to put there so that he can have
and the crisis is not necessarily defined. It could be anything.
Right. And we'd have to be context based on the crisis. How come you couldn't keep school going when an asteroid hit the high school? I mean, that kind of question. So.
Okay, so what I hear, Ron, from you is that, well, from Rebecca, that you like the OSBA standards as they are. And Ron, it sounds like you're arguing for that same situation. Keep them the way they are.
OSBA standards as the way they are now, I think is probably the best way to go now. And we'll have to, probably somewhere in there we can get something because if Joe does a great job with COVID standards and we just didn't mention it, that shouldn't be held against him. Joe can probably fit it under some category that's there. But what we ought to do then is this is, we're kind of late in the cycle. I don't really want to do anything too radically unexpected for him. And then after we've done this year, we can do a whole year's worth and put in the goal setting, not just because we're suggesting right now, just start with a strategic plan, which is what all we knew about our goals a year ago, maybe, because we didn't do specific goals for this year.
Bob, Inez, Dave, do you have thoughts?
I think, excuse me, I'm comfortable with, I like the OSBA tool. I think the old tool has kind of run its course for us. And the biggest thing will be getting onto a different schedule. Like we talked about before, the old schedule was kind of taking that old fashioned view where nothing really happened in July and August. And that's not been the case for a while. So getting onto that new schedule. So we're not here in almost October saying, well, you know, we're just getting started with this evaluation process. But yeah, I like the new tool.
Yeah, so did I. And I do think that if we have that flexibility of tweaking some things so that they are particular for the specific year, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, so it sounds like nobody has a problem with the tool. A second sort of part of this conversation that Ron also alluded to was last year when we did this, we thought, yes, 2020 is going to be the year we do the 360, or I guess 2021, the year we do the 360. What is everybody feeling like at that point? Do we want to do the full 360? Do we want to do some sort of nothing?
While I love a 360 because it's so complete and comprehensive, I think with everything going on, it might be too much to juggle and to require of other people as well.
Joe, what do you feel about the new thing and the possibility of a 360?
I think this might be a hard year to do 360 because none of us are together, right? And a 360, if that's something you'd like to do, I think that talking about doing it in March for the following year and then setting up the kinds of goals like that, I think will probably be, I'm hopeful be in a more regular year next year. So, you know, I had just brought up the strategic plan and I was trying to kind of put that against or juxtapose that with the professional standards one that's linked in the packet. And you know, I think there are some ways to look at where those cross over because there are some differentials, but there are still some things that happen, you know, in a pandemic year even. So there are still the visionary leadership, you still have to do that. You still have to have, you know, the ethics and professional norms, district culture. And so those categories still fit for this year. And so I certainly would welcome a 360, but I think doing it in a year that we have some sense of normalcy might give you a better, clearer picture of that. And if we move forward with these 8 standards, I think we can figure out the places that it makes sense, the most sense in a pandemic year, and then connect those with our strategic plan. So I think we might be okay on doing those together. I think that'd probably be best for this year.
We just lost Ron. Hopefully he'll come back on.
Yeah, I would agree with Inez that I'm a big supporter of the 360 style of review, but to do it this year, I don't know if we'd really get the impact that we were looking for. And I wouldn't want to try and do it just to say we did it. Again, I'd always rather see us do something well. I'd rather see us do one thing well than 3 things kind of, sort of, maybe.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is people are comfortable with the updated tool and not doing a 360 this year. Okay. Well, we're only down to 5 board members now. I don't know I don't know what happened to Ron, but I would entertain a motion if there's no further questions.
I move that the board approve the superintendent evaluation criteria and process as developed.
I'll second.
Okay, any more discussion? No? All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. Oh,
There's Ron.
Ron, we're voting. If you want to vote yes, Bob just made the motion. You're muted.
You're muted.
What exactly was the motion?
I moved that we approve the, what do we approve? The evaluation criteria and process as developed.
Okay, I'm voting for that.
Okay, so all those in favor, please raise your hand again. Thank you. All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. I'm glad you're back, Ron.
I think maybe Dundee went out or something because you were all went off at once for me. So
I don't know.
just me, maybe.
All right, next up, we've got the superintendent and board working agreement. Is there any discussion or questions around this?
This is Rebecca. I sent an email out to the rest of the board of some points. I like the working agreement, and I think it's important that we pay attention, that we follow the agreement. And I think that the number one, communications, that we respond to constituents' emails 36 to 72 hours after receiving them. And if Brandy is our representative, that if it gets too much for her, that she has the options to ask Ron as vice chairman, or I would suggest Bob as senior board chairman, who's been a previous board chairman, to help out in that situation. I'd also like to suggest that we take, if one board member will take a month to respond to the people who spoke in the meetings. Brandy's been doing this all on her own for us. And if we could just take the time to thank the people who spoke and let them know we heard them and we appreciate it, and we'll take it up. And there would be 6 board members, and we could each take a month. There's only two meetings a month. Just to help share the load. That's just a suggestion. The third part I really want to talk about is how we communicate with the superintendent and the board chairman prior to board meetings. We had a situation like tonight with Dave Brown, had a situation where he brought up the 9th grade English book. And that would have been probably better to present that he's heard this information from constituents, that he emailed Joe previously to the meeting. It could have been put on the agenda and worked out, but to bring it up without letting the board chairman know or the superintendent know that you have a problem or you don't agree with a situation, it's not being very respectful to the board, to our time, and it doesn't help us through clarity before the board meetings. You still have the opportunity to bring it up during the board meeting, but then the superintendent or Karen would have had time to find out the answer for us. And so it would be shared in a public meeting. We need to get much better about sharing prior to the meetings our problems and our disagreements. And if we had done that better, this last summer, I think a lot of the turmoil and the contention we experienced could have been dealt with differently. And the last point I want to bring up is about if we as a board member are approached by a newspaper reporter for an interview, I appreciated Inez letting us know she was being interviewed by the McMinnville paper, but it would be respectful to let the other board members know that you're being that there's a newspaper article coming out, because it's respectful that you don't surprise us, or we don't open up the Newberg graphic and find this article and we don't know anything about it. So it's a matter of building collaboration and cooperation with each other and transparency with each other. So that's all
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that, Rebecca. I don't agree at all. We go through this endless maraud of presentations from the district staff, and then they ask us if we had any questions. And I simply asked our curriculum person a question. What are we supposed to do in these meetings? If we don't ask questions, if we don't come up with stuff from our district staff, they could put all these things in an email. We'd never have to listen to them. We don't talk about any of these things at a school board meeting. When are we going to actually have some real discussions about what's really happening in our classrooms to our students? What's wrong with that questioning? Karen answered it. She did a good job. And I asked a question.
But Dave, you said you had talked, that constituents had talked to you. And it says in our board policies that when constituents talk to us with an issue, we're to let the superintendent know about it so that he can deal with it. And yes, we always have the opportunity to ask questions, but there's been questions asked that have not been asked ahead of time, so that the people or like with the resolution, there was a week, we were given an opportunity to share what we felt about the resolution.
Fine, I will bury you guys in comments I get from the public. I'll send them all in. You got it. I'll do that because I hear it all the time. But these people did not get a response from our superintendent. At least at the time I talked to them, they'd heard from their teacher and their principal. They were so frustrated, they pulled their child out of our school district. They were so frustrated, they were reaching for straws and called me. Don't even know who these people are. And so when we have topics, but that's fine. I agree. I'll send that through every single time.
I think what Rebecca's trying to say is that we need to have transparency and communication. So having more transparency of saying, gosh, I've got this issue that's come up. I'm going to go ahead and let the appropriate people at district staff know so that when it comes up in the meeting, they're prepared, I'm prepared, we can all have a conversation and possibly make motions about it. The issue with not giving that sort of heads up to anybody is that then we're stuck in a meeting, spending more time on an issue, and we don't come to resolution often when we're supposed to.
So you think we should never ask a question to Karen Pugsley or any of our district?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You can ask any question. For example, I'll give you a personal example. I had a question in regards to Nikki's budget report tonight. And I wondered why the state revenue was so far lower in the 23-25 biennium. Like why, I get that COVID's impacting us now. I get it'll impact next biennium, but why that far out biennium? So I emailed her and I got an answer. I was planning to ask that question at the board meeting. However, other questions were asked. She had answered my question. And so I was able to move on and we kept on track. It's that sort of reciprocal information sharing and gathering that you do in the build up to a board meeting. So when you get to the board meeting, you can conduct business. Does that answer your question?
Let me say one more thing about that. Dave, you asked two questions of her. One was right on the topic of her presentation and the other one was not, only kind of remotely because it did have to do with the curriculum, but it was about specific curriculum and not in general about how we were dealing with COVID. And that's why it became kind of a surprise. It was a surprise to me. I think it would be fine for you to let her know, even at the meeting, if you hadn't thought of it. Oh, by the way, I've had some constituents worry with me about a particular thing, and I'd like to get in touch with you and let you know what that is later, just to give her a notice there, but to have a conversation about it when nobody was prepared. Fortunately, Karen was pretty good on her feet, but the rest of us didn't really have any way to be prepared for that. So I think you are right. You have the opportunity as a board member, and as things come up, to mention them, but to ask people to take time on it in a board meeting when it's not on the agenda does put us in a bad spot. And I felt like that question, the second question about the book, was not really on our agenda for today.
And what I'll say about the question you asked about the book, and it's a good example. If you were really trying to advocate for those folks, you didn't help me out at all to help advocate for them. I have no idea what we're talking about. So another way you could have approached that would have been to ask the question to Joe, and then he could have responded to all of us and given us that information. And then we could have made our own decisions about whatever the issue is. As it is now, all I know about it is that it seemed like the conversation got sidetracked. And I think that's what folks are trying to get at, is that asking hard questions is always appreciated, but there's a way and a time and a procedure for that. And I would also, counsel all of us to be careful, but you did it just now, Dave, using constituent questions as a threat, telling me that you're going to bury me in constituent questions. That comes across as threatening. That comes across as you're holding back. You've got a whole lot of information that you're holding back, and you're only going to release it to show me something, to prove me wrong. And I don't even know what we're talking about. One thing I would like to say to Rebecca's comment, while I am flattered that you pointed me out, I think responding to when we respond as a board, we need to have our chair and our vice chair respond when they're speaking for the whole. That is in policy. Because there are two people who are voted in for that reason to speak for us as a whole. So I would be uncomfortable with having someone who's not in that chair or vice chair role speak for the board.
Wow, you guys, Brandy, I'll tell you what, then if we're going to be transparent, let's all be transparent. We use this word around the school board meeting like it's a big, important word, which it should be. But right now, I can tell you right now that there are people within our district office that aren't being very transparent out in social media and with me. So, I mean, if they were going to use that word transparent all the way, how come we get into a board meeting? A lot of this stuff we're getting from the district office staff, which is good information, could be sent to us in an email. We're spending hours sitting here listening to stuff that could be done in an email. If we're talking about being efficient in a board meeting because we can't stop and ask questions, then let's just get all this stuff in email. We can just deal directly with Derek or whoever that district person is making that thing. But if we're not going to sit back and talk to them in a meeting, and if you don't like the question, then everybody's upset.
Well, of course it is. There are some, your point is good, that a lot of the information we get is stuff that we could get in writing, but hopefully there's some efficiency in having these conversations when everybody's present, so that they can only be happening once. Otherwise, Derek would have to have the same or slightly different conversations 7 times. So for his sake, it's probably better off or any staffers, it's probably better off if we can do it all at once. Again, Dave, my concern is not with you asking questions or anybody else asking questions. I ask more questions than anybody probably. The concern is that if the questions take us off of our agenda, that's when it becomes a possible use of a time sink, because there's an infinite number of those, and also makes it difficult for staff and for the rest of the board to be prepared to understand what's going on, because this is the first we've heard about it. So certainly you can alert at any time in the meeting when even just when it occurs to you, if you're being polite to others and wait to a pause, we can raise an issue. We should talk about this. And I did this the other time, a couple of sections ago, when I said we ought to revisit the, the early admit as soon as we can get back in class attendance. And then I said that we should put it on an agenda and sometime. I'm not going to talk about it now. And I didn't spend more than the 30 seconds it took me to ask a 15-second question. So I think that's where the line is, as much as it is. Think about what's on the agenda. Anything that's related to the agenda is fair game. Anything that extends to something out beyond the agenda, like a particular individual piece of curriculum, let us know it's going to be an issue. You could even do it in a meeting, but then let us all get prepared before we have an extended conversation about it.
Well, I'd only ask at the end of this thing then, if you guys, Brandy, you're the board chair, so let's start dividing our time up a little bit more so we can dive into some of these issues in a board meeting instead of getting cut short if it's taking too much time. Let's start being more efficient with the things we're talking about in our meetings and have a limit put on our district staff.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Sure.
correct me if I'm wrong. The presentations are mainly to inform us because we want to know this information and we requested to be kept in the loop, right?
Right. And it could have been done in an email, right, Inez? It could have. A lot of this stuff, it takes 20, 30 minutes to talk about.
Yeah, but how many people have been joining our Zoom calls that normally wouldn't hear this information?
How much did we actually get done tonight? Not much.
We voted on several things, and that's part of what these reports often, like the SIA plan, for example, that couldn't have been put in an email because we had to take board action on that. So often these plans have to inform us because we have to take action.
They could have time limits on them.
One piece of feedback I want to give on the working agreement that kind of ties in with what Dave is saying. We are a public body and we do have to work in public. We can't work exclusively through emails. And one thing, and I'll put it out to the board if we need to revise the wording or just re-emphasize it. I mentioned in an earlier meeting that the one issue that I have with our working agreement is that I want us to be really careful about not using blind carbon copies to communicate with each other. I think that dances around the law of public meetings. It certainly, to my view, goes against the spirit of public meetings. What we've talked about is that the chair will use a BCC when responding for the board to a question or a comment to the whole board, and that individual members can choose to BCC in the board to let us know what their correspondence is with a constituent. But several times, and I've talked with folks when it's come up, board members have written to the board as a whole just on various topics and done it with a BCC thinking that covers us for public meeting laws. And I'm not a lawyer, but I don't believe it does. And I think it's a bad practice to communicate between each other as a BCC.
I think it's, I don't feel like this document was really referred to, and it wasn't a document that I think that we as a board kept on the forefront of our mind. And I would like to see that change this coming year. I don't know, what that means, if maybe it's reminders now and again, if, we just need to all make sure that we are fully aware of it, that we read it, that we understand it, and that we all accept it if we choose to vote it in tonight. I'm sure, we can all improve on it, certainly, Dave. I do not want you to feel like you're being bombarded by this. I just want you to understand we have the time limits on the meeting, and I try to stick to them in respect in regard to board members' time and district staff time. And it's very important for us to have conversations and to be prepared for our business meeting. And I know something that I can certainly improve on, and that is in the last probably 3 weeks, have gotten behind on responding to constituents because it's just been a bit overwhelming. And I certainly should have looked at this closer and responded with an ask for help from Ron as the vice chair. So that's certainly something I can work on and on being more conscious of Ron in the coming year.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I know. So I think we can all look at this, and I would really I would really ask all of you to spend some time looking at it, and if there's anything you can improve in your boardsmanship, I would highly recommend it.
I'd like to add just one thing in a little bit of defense of Brian Shannon. I think that I've talked to Brian about this. I mean, Brian's mannerisms can be tough to handle. I mean, I've worked with people that have been sharp and direct and asked tough questions and tone of voice. I get all that. But I would say one thing, our entire board, we talked about this last board meeting, you guys, is we're all very different people. And some of the very, very best questions that I've heard in my 14 months on the board have come from Brian Shannon. Now, whether the timing is good, maybe not. Maybe the tone isn't very good. But the question itself, and then we start to talk about it, and maybe his timing is off, but we've got to fix that so we can talk about that. But I think all the board members need to be accepting. To me, it seems like we're only trying to be accepting sort of one way here. And if we're not trying to fit, my goal is not to wake up and frustrate you guys at a school board meeting. I want to come here and get something done for the school district. Tonight, we did a few things and we spent a lot of time doing it. I think our district staff, Derek and all those guys, Luke, put in a ton of time. If they could cut down on how much time they're responding to us in the private business world, they wouldn't have to spend another evening away from their home and spending a ton of time with us. And I know that's part of their job and they're doing it well, but it is also very time consuming to them, especially when we're in a pandemic and all the extra things they're doing too. So I'm just saying, let's just work and be more efficient. Brandy, time-wise, I think you're doing fine. You're staying to our timelines. I get that. And I know that's frustrating to run a meeting. I've done it. So you're not doing bad there at all. Please don't take it that way. I just think that maybe we're trying to jam way too much into something. We can tighten it up a little bit and just be more efficient.
At that point, I think Dave does speak my mind in part. We have a lot of things on the agenda, and we've heard from OSBA people before that it's easy for boards to get too deep into the details of some things and spend too little time on the big picture. And we don't have a lot of time to spend on big picture questions right now, partly because the school district has 2 or 3 extra layers of work because of crises. And maybe it'll get back to more normal. So that's an issue that I resonate with. I also would like to think about the current agreement says on the top of the second page, board members should share ideas about new programs and new directions with the superintendent and the board chair before presenting them publicly, which is something I didn't know was a good idea when I was a new board member, and I tried to share a new idea and I was frustrated because it didn't go right away. Well, this is why, because so many people have to get ready before we can make good decisions. And so we have to give people notice and give them a chance to get ready. The question about the particular curriculum is not a new program or a new direction. I guess it's kind of a new program, but it doesn't really fit. And I think that we could do something to extend this to new issues. When an issue is introduced for the first time at the board meeting and a lot of time is given to it, that's not going to be very efficient time. So if we were to extend that clause, or at least the understanding of that clause, is anytime something new has come to us that I want to bring up to the board that's going to be for the first time, I should give them some kind of notice of that. Unless it's an actual crisis, it can always catch the next meeting when everybody's had a chance to think about it. And that would be a way to make it clear what you're supposed to do when you have an idea that hasn't come up or an issue that hasn't come up on the board. How is it best to be dealt with? Under the no surprises rule. Give us all as much as you can. Notice that it's coming, so we have an idea to do that. And that would, one way to do that is to get it on an agenda, so we can all see it a week ahead. Something like that might help us address those kind of questions.
Actually, this is, I think, the most conversation we've had around this working agreement probably in quite a while. And that's a healthy thing to do, because I think it's all in our minds now, which is good. All right, well, in the spirit of getting us moving along on time, are there any other points or questions before I entertain a motion?
Does it make any sense for us to put this off and let us I mean, that one I'm pointing at on the top of the second page to write that, or some of Rebecca's things are concerns that she didn't try to write in board agreement language. Is it worth sending it to a couple people to see if they can kind of distill some stuff that can go into the agreement, or we could adopt this and treat those things as amendments later? I don't know. I just don't feel like I'm ready to say we've all agreed that this is what our agreement should be. And I'd much rather get as close to that as possible before we adopt it.
I agree. I'd like to see some, particularly, I like, Ron, your getting at rewording, not just new initiatives and new programs, but things that are outside of the agenda, some way to word that. And also, I think I'd rather have all of us here. I understand Brian was not feeling well tonight, but it'd be good to have all of us vote on that working agreement rather than doing it when we're short one person.
Bob, I sense your inner Quaker at work in there.
So we had this discussion a little bit last meeting because there was the possibility of us having a work session. Does anybody think that would be a valuable use of our time to potentially schedule a work session before the next board meeting? Bob says yes.
Good, Brandy. I think if we had, even half hour, but maybe an hour to work on this, so we stay away from the regular board agenda, it'd probably be, I just said, be more efficient with our time, but maybe this will help us be more efficient. So I would say that'd be a good idea.
Can it be something we do close to the end of the business day to make it as kind as possible to our staff, even in the business day? I don't know what people can do. Brian, I'm sure has problems getting us before 5, I suppose.
We could do another, 6:30 or 6 o'clock before the board meeting. It does make it for a long night, but then we don't have to have 2 nights of it.
I think it would be preferable if we could figure out a way to work it into an agenda, and even if we extend by half an hour to begin with for the workshop to start and then go into the business meeting afterwards. I'm worried with what staff are doing right now. We're adding another night onto their calendar to be present for something like that. So I would prefer to just extend by half an hour, beginning maybe 6:30, do a workshop, and it can bleed in a little bit, but we can adjust the agenda afterwards. I think that would just for staff, would be a better move for us.
May I say something else, Brandy?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't mean to be critical of people who ask questions. I ask a lot of questions, but that we follow procedure out of respect and collaboration, and how we can work together to bring the best to the school board, to our students and to our parents. I think just to look at it, I just tried to share some things that I was feeling, and I don't mean to make people defensive of their actions. It's just if we can all improve or follow this, like you said, bring it to our mind more consistently.
Okay, go ahead, Bob.
Well, I was going to say, and it's a good opportunity, Dave, if there are, and anybody else, but you expressed issues, Dave, if there are parts of this agreement that are not working for you, come up with some alternative wording and send that to Brandy so she's got that ahead of that workshop. That's a way to advocate better than, just getting frustrated in meetings, to help, provide that alternative in concrete wording for folks to review.
That's a great suggestion, and I am going to put it out to the entire board. I think that if we want to have a 30-minute work session that's streamlined and productive, we all need to come with any wording changes that we would like to propose. So I'm going to put that out there, because otherwise 30 minutes might not be enough time for us to actually construct it. So if everyone could think about that, get them to me, or, well, I don't know, I guess if you could get them to me, or we could try to hash it out there at the time. I don't know what we all think would be the best.
Well, one thing they could do is just send them in, not for us to converse about, but to make a little packet of suggestions
Yeah.
that we could then distribute, sort of the Greg's function, but we could do it ourselves. As long as just selecting a packet and sending it out so we can all see it in advance, and we're not, and then the public we'd have to make that public as well. I don't know, maybe you have to put it in an actual packet, but then, so the public can see it and it's all public meeting. That could speed up the process. It's certainly better than trying to compose language at the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to suggest folks, sending that wording into Brandy, and that way, we can't talk about it, we can't discuss it or work on it beforehand, but at least then the chair and the vice chair will know what we're looking at. If they know we have 45 suggested re-edits, then they'll structure that meeting differently. If we have 2 re-edits, then they'll structure the meeting another way. But again, they know what they're looking at when they walk into that meeting.
Okay.
If there are 45, we'll probably structure the meeting so I can't be there.
I know, we know where you live. Okay, so I'll send an email out in a couple of days as a reminder to each board member, because obviously Brian's not here and I want him to understand what we're asking, just to remind everybody. Okay, so we're gonna move on then, because that was a action item, but we're gonna push it out a little bit. Okay, next up, we've got board evaluation process. So I spoke with OSBA to get information regarding the sort of process and how much this costs. If we choose to do the board self-evaluation, use that tool that we used last year, they give us the tool, obviously. OSBA analyzes it. We get a 2-hour facilitated discussion, and that is $500 without travel. So if they're coming from Salem, travel shouldn't be that much more on top of that. The free version is basically, here's the tool, and then we get some sort of basic information out of it, and that's it. So
I think it's worth the investment, and I want us to continue using something that we used last year to be able to compare our information.
I hate anytime we spend money on the board, but $500 seems like a very good investment for what we got out of it last year, particularly with that guided discussion portion. I think that would be really worthwhile.
any other questions on this or thoughts?
I think I have to declare a potential conflict of interest since I'm a candidate for a position, as an employee of OSBA. I don't think that requires me not to vote, but just to be safe, I'm not going to participate and I'll abstain when the time comes.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this? Well, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move that the Newberg School District Board of Directors approve the board evaluation process as developed.
I'll second.
Close, Rebecca. You almost got it. All right. Is there any more discussion? No. Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And Rebecca, I can't see. You got to use your left hand. There we go. There it is. Thank you. Passes unanimously. Okay. So I will reach out to them and.
No,
I abstain. I abstain.
Oh, and an abstention. I'm sorry. Sorry. Ron abstained. Greg. Thought we already established it, but you're right. I need to call it out. Okay, I will reach out to them and see when we can get that scheduled. All right, next we have this discussion of Spanish translation for board meetings. So this is something we've talked about for a little while. I think it's something that became even more pressing in times of COVID, when we've seen a lot of community participation. And we're seeing a lot of community participation with the Latinx parent group meetings and then now the Mountain View parent group meetings. And I think that this is something that is long overdue, but it needs to be something that the board adopts. And Greg, you were going to have some information or numbers for us. Were you able to get those?
Yes, I apologize. I was not able to get those in time for tonight.
Okay. Joe, maybe, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm 100% for doing this. I think particularly when we're having to make so many fast and radical changes to our operations, I think it's important that we get information out to everybody as effectively as possible. The only question I have is, and it sounds like it's something that's still being worked on, is, you know, what's the most cost efficient way of doing it?
Yeah, I think we're looking at two options. One is to do it with internal staff, which I don't know if that's really the best option. The other option is to hire an outside consultancy firm or translation service firm, I'm sorry, that would provide the service. So, and I've got a couple of names from other school districts. Hillsborough uses a couple, so we definitely have some places to start.
Randy, how much does that cost?
That's what we don't know yet.
That's what I didn't get, Dave. That was my fault.
I think we need to put this off until we know that.
Okay. We'll bump it to the next agenda maybe, or we can talk about it at the agenda meeting, Greg, and if that's a realistic timeline. And also if there's something that as chair, I can help do. Okay. Budget committee members. So there are no budget committee members who are up this year with expiring terms. So if everybody could take a look at their zone and their budget committee representative, reach out to them in the next couple of weeks to make sure that they're still on board, see if they're still interested. And of course, if not, then to pursue other committee members. Does anybody have questions around that? Go ahead, Rebecca.
Rick Lee is willing to continue on my, for my zone.
Excellent. Okay, and I'll reach out to Judy.
AJ is also good.
AJ is good? Okay, good. All right. So, future agenda items. Another bond update, because we'll be, well, 2 weeks closer at that point. Potentially National Bullying Prevention Month, proclamation, Migrant Summer School EL report, Division 22 assurance. And I'm sure there will be other things that come up between now and then that need to be on the board, like the Spanish translation. And of course, we'll have that working session beforehand too. So please mark your calendars for 6:30.
I will do my best to get the cost information out to you ahead of time by email so that you'll have that information and be able to make a decision at the next board meeting.
Thank you, Greg, for all that you do. All right. Anything else? We're only 9 minutes behind. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.